Hey, everybody. How about it? It is season 8, and oh man, we're fired up. We're so ready to talk about awesome episode 1 and the rest of the season. And it's so cool to be here with all you guys because we have so much fun chatting and just geeking out over this amazing fandom. And yeah, we're here. We're ready to go. We've got a ton of notes. Let me say a few things before we get into the meat of it, as the beginning of the season comes with a few announcements. We don't have a new intro to match their awesome intro, but we do have some new gear. Big shout out to Ashea for spending a lot of this past weekend getting us ready for that. Yay! New microphones, new webcam, and it's hard to introduce a whole bunch of gear at once, but she put in a lot of work on that. So
next week we'll get new brains.
Yeah, next week new brains, which we very much need. And of course, welcome back, Sean. If y'all didn't catch any of our pre-show episodes, well, this is your first time seeing Sean in a while. So hey, welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Quick 2-minute, or let's say 1 minute. Quick 1 minute recap of what you thought about last night. Actually, no. Let me not ask you that. Let me ask you about the hour before the show. How did you feel the hour before it started? Like that anticipation.
I was doing twiddling my thumbs, you know.
I think you were eating desserts, Sean.
I think I was eating Oreo cookies, Game of Thrones Oreo cookies. Yeah, I was definitely fired up. It was especially the process of like rewatching all the seasons leading up to it, and even the podcast that we did the day prior. It was. I almost felt like I had already watched the first episode. If that makes sense. I was so immersed in everything.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's slightly surreal. I even wonder, speculating if that extra year in between, I'm sure as like as showrunners from like a marketing standpoint, scheduling of HBO and everyone, taking a year off is kind of risky. People might drop off. But I think that it's gone around, you know what I mean? I think they probably picked people up. It gave people time to catch up. Anyone who's been holding off, they had a whole extra year to catch up. I know multiple people who did that themselves. Anyway, I'm curious what numbers are, if there are numbers out there as far as
that's a good question. Yeah,
but
we're gonna have, as we often do, we're gonna do a lot of what we can in this first episode, and this will always be 7 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. And anything we miss, and any book stuff or anything that takes more than 24 hours analysis, we'll either cover on the Saturday preview for the next episode, which will always be 2 o'clock Eastern on Saturdays, or on the book to show episodes, which will be every Wednesday, also at 7. And we're going to have Lady Gwen and Ashea and guests.
Sometimes I like to call dibs on topics.
That's right. So as you can see, as part of our new setup, Ashea has a microphone for herself, and Sean and I each have our own microphones as well. So when Ashea wants to say something from off camera, we can actually hear her. That's pretty nice. A couple of super chats from Timothy Galvin. How's beard into house? Yes, indeed. And you're the first super chatter of the official beginning of the season. So good job, Timothy Galvin. And the Merchant Prince also says, wishing y'all all the best with your coverage this season. What is hype may never die. Oh, and Ashea is the best. Lots of things to agree with there. Okay, so a couple of quick shout outs. I want to shout out Watchers on the Wall for their Game of Thrones coverage in the off season. They, of course, did amazing job covering stuff going on set and casting news, and during the season they do fantastic coverage as well, and we'll be looking forward to their coverage in the long term when the Age of Heroes show begins, whatever that's going to be called. And of course, another reminder that you can catch us at Ice and Fire Con and Con of Thrones, and that you can get $5 off either ticket purchase to either con with the code HISTORY. And speaking of Game of Thrones season, another reminder that we get to watch episode 3 at Ice and Fire Con. That's going to be a blast. It is really fun.
So awesome.
I know a lot of you guys had watch parties, and we had a watch party, about 10 or 12 people here. And well,
I thought it was going to be a wash party, but
we didn't clean anything. Yeah, in fact, more things got dirty, really. But so that's going to be a lot of fun. And I highly recommend making it to both conventions if you can, but only one if that's more doable for you. So one thing we're going to do in the Wednesday review is talk in more depth about the new intro. The new intro was awesome, but we want to take some time and get some photos and shots. And that's one of the topics that Ashea is calling dibs on too. So so we'll make sure to give that full coverage on Wednesday. But for now, we're just going to say, whoa, that was really cool, huh? Big surprise, right? I did not. We were all like, we were excited for small differences, maybe the wall having a difference in it, but we did not expect any of that.
Like an overhaul.
Yeah. And it's really amazing because of how good the intro is. This is one of the best show intros of all time, and they have managed to improve on it.
I also think it might help, or they might even be starting to realize something I've pointed out in the past, is that this show, as it becomes more and more part of culture, it's going to have iconic imagery that goes along with it, right? Like, even if you haven't seen Star Wars, everyone would just recognize the silhouette of R2-D2 or Darth Vader, or that.
Very true.
I think the map of Westeros. I think maybe the helmet of the Hound or the Mountain, the Iron Throne itself. I think there's going to be a lot of iconic imagery that's associated with Game of Thrones for a generation from now.
And they included some of that in the intro too.
Exactly. I think that'll either is as a result of, like, they are realizing these are icons that they need to represent, or because of that, it will cause them to be more so. Like, I recognize I might have a little bit of a skewed perspective of what's going on in the whole culture from Game of Thrones because I'm so deep in it, but I still feel like I'm not totally some amount of objectiveness I can have to realize this really is popular and famous. So
definitely. And and I think you make a good point there too, that they tried to maybe include some of those things in the intro, the throne and the dragon skull and some of the things like that. But mostly they focused on the major locations, which is what we will do here as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about one last starting point here before we get into the material. We're going to do things a little bit different with our Patreon announcements during the season. It's necessitated by the longer episodes. We have so much to cover. Of course, this first episode wasn't longer, but episode 3 is going to be the longest episode ever, and episodes 4, 5, and 6 are going to be really long as well. So with extra stuff to cover, we want to try to save a little time. So we're going to break the Patreon announcements up into split between Monday and Wednesday. The majority of them will be on Wednesday, but the ones that are related to the Beard Guard and show only coverage will be on this one. So that will save us a little bit of time, and we'll have we'll make that up with extra coverage. So speaking of recurring themes and iconic stuff, Sean, your drink, it looks really strange, even for your drinks. It's like lavender.
Yeah, it's one I've had before or similar. I might not get the ratios perfect every time, but it's the protein berry naked drink mixed with the blue Mountain Dew Voltage. And man, it's good.
I doubt
and,
it.
And relatively healthy. Okay. All the sugar and caffeine in Mountain Dew, but all the protein and nutrients of a naked drink.
Right on. Okay, cool. Well, I have my usual Valyrian steel purple coffee thermos, and no variety there at all. Just excellence. All right, we have a couple more super chats. Thomas Pappas says, hated the Bronn plot line, but after thinking about it more, this could be the physical embodiment of the sellsword riddle Varys poses to Tyrion in season 1. Hey, that's pretty cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. I think there's a few things about it I dislike, but I actually think it makes sense for Cersei to do something like this. We'll get more into that in the general flow of the episode where we have that in our notes. But that's a really good take. I'll have to think about that sellsword riddle more. I didn't think about that. I haven't seen that written anywhere elsewhere. So that bears further examination.
I don't know if it will perfectly apply to Bronn. Like, I think Bronn might not be just a sellsword at this point, but I definitely agree it's a good catch, a good thought to consider.
Yeah, it's probably not a perfect one-to-one, but it seems like it's very relevant and a good comparison.
Certainly we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Rebecca Bellick, happy to have the band back together. I want to hear everyone's good, bad, and the ugly for this episode. Yeah, we'll certainly be doing that. Well, we have our favorites and our least favorites and all the stuff in between. It's kind of cool that the episode is called Winterfell. Most of the scenes in the episode are at Winterfell, but there's plenty of others elsewhere. Although, to be fair, even the ones that aren't at Winterfell, several of them involve Winterfell. They're directly related. I almost made a spreadsheet before the episode just to talk about all the possible character convergences. Be like, well, what does this character have to do with this character? And see if they have anything to talk about. Because there's so many meetings and joinings and reunions. I was almost like, yeah, but I didn't do that because I didn't
say, Aziz, remember, as handsome as Sean is, don't look at him.
That's right. We have to get used to our new gear. I'm not supposed to look at Sean because then I'm not looking at my mic anymore.
Look at me when you're not talking.
Yeah, okay.
We can practice it real quick. You want to practice? Now I'll talk right now, and you look at me. Now you talk.
We're gonna need more practice. So there's also lots of. Oh, sorry, that's not where I was at.
You were talking about the spreadsheet
thing. The
you
characters.
realized you needed to start that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, to finish that in time. But we got an email. A couple people mentioned this, but the first one was from a listener who goes by Lady Elena Royce, and she pointed out that one of the convergences that didn't happen, but still could, is Mormont versus Mormont. We didn't have Lyanna talk to Jorah, and Lyanna's not exactly the type to just, I won't say that. She's going to speak her mind.
Could and should. I think. I hadn't thought of this. I feel silly that I hadn't thought of this, and my guess is that it will be part of Lyanna coming to terms with the real threat. She'll be more okay accepting Dany as queen, and more okay accepting Jorah back to the Seven Kingdoms when she sees the dead. That's what I expect.
All right, yeah. And I also wanted to say there's lots of overhead shots of Winterfell, which added to the title, not just in the intro, which had new shots of it, but several different shots with the dragons, not only when the dragons were flying by themselves, but when Dany and Jon were flying them. And that reveals how flat it is around Winterfell, which I think is going to be pretty relevant to the upcoming battle or battles. Which is just a little tidbit, nothing really to discuss there. But
I imagine it makes it easier to film, if nothing else. Imagine the hills and the cliff tops at Castle Rock and Highgarden, and all the other castles pretty much are up on these high elevation spots.
Another super chat from Nose Kills, who says, Jaime is a Kingslayer, Tyrion is a Kinslayer, Epidermis is a skin layer. Poetic, but I don't know what to make of it. Have a great stream. You don't have to make any of it. Wordplay is its own reward. So I think that's good. And wordplay as well on our show. We'll pause everything to drop a good pun. So yeah, the episode being called Winterfell, it's really fun. One of the things I really, really loved about the episode was just chock full of callbacks to season 1, episode 1, and a few other callbacks, but really to the first episode. And that was really fun, just seeing all that. And that's the kind of thing you can play with when you have a show that's gone on for a long time. You can't do that in season 2 of a show. I'd look how young we were in season 1. Only shows that are successful and long running can do that.
If they matched up the shows to the books, then they could see how old people got since then.
That's a good point. So talk about this first moment with this little boy who is like kind of Arya and Bran at the same time. Tell me what you thought of that.
I thought it was neat. It was like maybe the first this is just like, the first obvious recall to how things were going. And I was scared for a moment. I was scared for that little boy. He doesn't realize Jaime's on his way.
That's pretty good. That's pretty true. I love how he had this almost the exact same music from that same opening scene, which I don't think they ever used again. And it was only a slight variation on it, so that's really cool. And you get some familiar repeats. Arya, of course, being the one that's kind of the one watching, doing a lot of the watching. She's kind of our POV for the crowd in the first episode. And in this episode, she pretty much is again. She sees the Hound again, and Tyrion's also in that procession, so we don't see her see him. She's almost certainly aware he's there, but I don't know that Arya has a whole lot of thoughts on Tyrion versus so many other characters.
So are we getting into it now?
Let's get into it. Okay. Yeah, we're getting into it.
So here's the thought that I had this thought and tweeted it last night, and I've been thinking about it since, wanting to follow up. It was so fun to have these characters paraded in front of Arya and her different reactions. It was so good to see her react to the Hound and to Gendry. Right? I want to see more. I wish we could have seen 20 more characters. I want to think about how Arya would have responded to. It doesn't make sense maybe for some characters to be there, but if Cersei had walked by, Ellen Payne, I don't know, the Night King. We need to have her respond to each character of the show, what her facial expression would have been for them all.
I wonder, I loved, her looking at the Hound was kind of funny, and then Jon, she kind of wants to speak up, but she realizes it's a little, maybe I'll wait and talk to him later. She kind of like a little awkward look on her face, and then she sees Gendry, and she's just like smoldering. She's like, oh yeah. It's like, oh, speaking of growing up.
And by the way, speaking of, okay, I don't know if we're going to try to do them all at once or just talk about them as they come, but all the parallels to the first episode.
Yeah, they're just going to keep rolling off. We'll go as they go, as they come.
There was this sort of budding Stark, quote unquote, Baratheon romance when Arya is eyeing Joffrey as he comes through. Now we have this Stark Baratheon
Good
romance
point.
as Gendry's coming through and Arya's eyeing him.
Then we have the same line, "Where's Arya?" Which is both times it's directed at Sansa. In the opening season 1, episode, she's like, I don't know. This time she says, "Oh, lurking somewhere," which is great. You know, it just shows how Sansa knows her sister better than she did when she was 12, when they were just kind of opposites and didn't have a lot in common. Now they value each other a lot more.
Not just knows her better, accepts her more.
Yes.
Not like, oh, that silly girl, she should be here. Like, oh, she's lurking somewhere. She's doing her own
that's
thing.
cool,
You know,
yeah.
Arya, like, whatever, you know.
We'll get into this more later, but it's clear that the enmity of last season is not only gone, but fully reversed, it seems like. And also we have the same line. "Winterfell is yours, your grace." Ned says that to Robert, and Sansa, you know, after a brief delay, says it to Dany. And then is when we're reminded that this isn't just nostalgia. When Bran goes, "We don't have time for this." I was like, whoa. Yeah,
it is ironic the
right.
things that they do or don't have time for, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They have time to fly off and hang out at some waterfalls, but they can't have reunions. So they have a council coming up. Oh, actually, we missed a shot here. The lineup here. Did you put that on screen, Shea?
I did not put it on screen because you did not instruct me.
That's right. I did not. That was my fault. Sometimes you catch my mistakes like that, so I was hoping you did this time. So yes, let's take a look at the way they're arrayed for Dany and Jon's arrival and compare it to the way they were arrayed for the King and Queen's arrival in season 1, episode 1. People are even standing in similar positions as they were there. You have Roderick standing in a pretty similar place to Bronn, Jon, Royce, and they're kind of similar kind of dudes, older, distinguished warriors of a past generation. And Maester Wolkan is similarly situated to Maester Luwin. It's really, really fun and intentional. And it's nostalgia for, and it's a great way to kick off the final season because it reminds us of everything we've been through. So let's talk about this council, though. This is when things start to get a little heated. The reunion, Bran's sort of, "We don't have time for this," is almost a segue to the next scene where there's arguments and some difficulties. Sansa and Lyanna and others are unhappy, as predicted. And it's reasonable for them to be unhappy. I think Lyanna said it really well. It's like, "We named you king in the North. You can't say that's not important. Our will, we're the lords of the North. We're the North. We said that. That matters." So they're not too happy with Jon. What did you think of that?
Well, for one thing, I think that the exact same mistake that Jon has been making, he continues to make. He needs to have a conversation with Sansa before this public forum. He just needs, like, Sansa had, even if it is, I don't know, it's emotional on some level or I don't know, short-sighted, so subversive. I don't know what word you might want to use or what group of words you might want to use, but it is also correct. She is also right. They do have to account for the food for these armies. That's a big, and I wish I could remember who it was, but someone pointed this out, that the real advantage that the Night King has, in my opinion, of his army, it's not like magic or they're zombies or they can't be killed out. They don't have to feed them. They don't have to feed these armies. They could just march all day and all night, all Seven Kingdoms, and not have to feed the soldiers, which, maybe you could also include in that morale. That's a factor. How well fed the soldiers are is a factor. How well paid, how well taken care of their families are at home, And these are things that Jon and Sansa and Dany do have to account for. They do have to account for, even if you could just assume that no matter what, that all the soldiers will be blindly loyal, no matter how cold it is, how tired they are, whatever, how hungry they are. The fact is, even if you had that, which you don't, even if you did have that, when they get hungry, they still don't fight as well. When the people of the land don't have food, what does it matter if the armies are fighting for them, if everyone's just starving? You know what I mean? It's something that's just like not even mentioned by anyone except Sansa. What might be the most, maybe we'll say the second most important thing, right? Constantly is pointed out how it's way more important to worry about beating the Night King than it is who sits on the Iron Throne or who's the king or queen of Winterfell, da-da-da. That's true. But guess what's also more important than who sits on a throne, who's the king or queen of Winterfell, is whether or not the people are fed. That's also more important.
Yes.
And Sansa seems to be the only person who really understands this. And
it kind of makes her into it makes her into the person that's taking things seriously when other people should be taking them just as seriously, and that makes her sometimes seen as, I don't know, it puts the wrong view of her. She's being responsible, and sometimes people just see that as she's being argumentative, which I think is kind of silly because she's raising really, really good points. And it's clear that she is thinking about important things that other people are not thinking about.
And if they had just had a meeting beforehand, Sansa could air this concern.
Yeah.
Then Jon could address this concern to everyone, and Sansa doesn't have to challenge him. Jon gets to realize that it is a problem. In fact, probably before they even showed up, they should have been sending ravens. Tyrion should have been, we're showing up this many men, we need this many barrels of grain, da-da-da-da. Like, this is all stuff that good leaders should be communicating. It's not enough to be a good fighter. It's not enough to have royal blood. You actually have to lead. You know?
Yeah. I respect the difficulty the showrunners faced with this situation, because it would make no sense for Sansa to just be like, okay, Dany's here, let's do this. But they didn't, so far, they haven't seemed to dwell on it. Jon convinced Sansa, she was like, at least she's prettier. Like that was her little jokey way of saying, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe we do have to do this. But it wouldn't make sense for her to not be protective. It wouldn't make sense for her to just, what's up?
I was merely trying to signal to you not to look at Sean.
I can't help it. He's so handsome. But so she also has a lot of insight that I thought was really useful that Jon missed. For example, Jon gets upset that Lord Glover supposedly broke his promise and isn't coming to Winterfell to back them up. And he's upset that he's like, oh, he broke his promise. And Sansa's like, he didn't really break his promise, dude. He promised to follow the king in the north, and you gave that title up. We totally, this is what Lyanna was saying. Like, there is a fallout from your decision. Even if it's the right decision, it comes with some negative, and that downside is just part of the equation. So, and that's just I like that she's the one making this read and understanding. Like, she's like, I know how he feels.
We see Joffrey Joffrey's out. Obviously, we even get specifically this idea that Jon's like, you don't think I'm like Joffrey, do I? And Jon isn't like Joffrey in that he's sadistic, and is different from Joffrey in that he is, I don't know, heroic, brave, etc. But the thing that is that Joffrey just doesn't consider the impact that his actions have on his people. Among all the other bad things about Joffrey, that is one problem. And Jon is doing the same thing, has consistently done the same thing. Even when he's right about things, he just doesn't consider how it's going to play out when he makes his decisions. He doesn't plan, he doesn't address concerns. It's just clearly part of his character.
He just does the right thing, quote unquote, which, he often hasn't suffered the consequences for doing the right thing when it wasn't the right way to do the right thing. You know what I mean? Because he just gets really lucky. Like, he charges the Bolton position and doesn't die, and
he gets raised,
dies and doesn't die. But that's not a knock on Jon. We love Jon because he's this always do right character. But it definitely comes with he needs some. It shows why he needs advice, why he needs to listen to other people sometimes.
And even the characters we might think of as actual good leaders, they also have advisors.
Oh, yeah.
And however evil Tywin might have been, he gave Tom a good advice.
Yeah,
you need wisdom.
Dany
look, when you're young and inexperienced, guess what? Listen to the wisdom of people around you. And
that's something Dany seems to have learned pretty well. She's pretty good at listening to her advisors, whereas Jon is kind of acts like he's going to listen and sometimes just goes his own way because he gets emotional. Like, again, that's the whole Bolton situation again. I'm maybe making too much out of that one, but that's a microcosm of his behavior.
To be fair, he hasn't exactly been surrounded by good advisors either.
That's also true. That's also true. The Watch doesn't have the level of skilled people with skills with administration and leadership and all that. Not to the level of people Daenerys had around her. That's a very fair point.
And he did seek out Maester Aemon's advice.
That's true.
And Aemon said, "Go ahead and do it." So Jon did it. So
that's true. That's true. And Sam, when he had Sam there, he listened to Sam. But his other problem is he just doesn't trust people. A lot of people. He's a little hard to get close to.
Yeah.
Whereas Dany is people just flock to her. She's just that kind of personality. She's very likable and very open. Now, but we're speaking more about Sansa. I think that another great observation of Sansa, and of course, some people can comment on how she's gotten a bit dismissive, which maybe that's a personality flaw, but whatever. She's just doing right. She's very smart, and she's being pushed in the wrong direction by people who aren't aware of all these factors, who aren't weighing a lot of these factors properly. And it's tough to be the only one worrying about certain problems and have no one else worrying about them with you. But she just really nails it with Tyrion. Sure, she was a little brusque with him, but she was so right. Like, how can you possibly think Cersei is going to come and help? Like, you're so obviously wrong. And everyone else, like, no, almost nobody else seems to get it. Like, I think Jamie, like, obviously Jamie didn't even get it. He had to, like, confront her and be like, oh, well, you're stupid. Of course we're not doing that. And Jamie's like, really? Really? You aren't going to go north? I can't believe it. But Sansa's like, hello, everyone should have figured this out.
I will say that once again, they all saw something that Sansa didn't. They saw the undead. It was enough. Cersei, they saw Cersei's reaction. It was believable to them that she actually was now concerned about this over the things.
I guess, but I think that still just doesn't just doesn't mistakes how Cersei's personality works. She's like, oh yeah, those undead are going to attack my enemies. That's all she cares about.
I do think that's why Sansa is able to see it so much more clearly is because she wasn't a witness to all that. I think she's right, and Tyrion should be able to figure it out. It's right. But I can see why it might take him a minute, you know.
I'm guessing that even if Sansa had seen the undead, or when she sees them, it's not going to affect her
she
opinion
might have
on
still
Cersei.
known better, yeah.
And this, by the way, is an interesting underscoring of Daenerys' criticism of Tyrion from last season, that he's not tough enough on his family, that he's underestimating them, or he's playing them with kid gloves. And, you know, if Sansa had been in that council advising Daenerys on Dragonstone about how to proceed and how to attack King's Landing, I feel like she might have said some of the things that, say, Ilaria said. You know, no, you just got to do it. You got to just be a dragon. You know, or I know Lena said some of the same things. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Sansa is certainly not anywhere near as cruel or selfish as Cersei. Not even remotely close. She is a much more good person. But she's got some of that, are you kidding me? You know, this is how it is attitude now, which I think is correct. And given how everybody else is behaving, it needs to be there.
Maybe it's good to have this pull and push of idealism and utilitarianism.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And that's a good like counter theme of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
We have a kind of a brief scene. This happens a little later, but I think I wanted to place it here because of how it flows with the rest of the episode. Talking the brief conversation with Varys and Tyrion in Davos, where that conversation really made me miss Olenna, because the whole Varys talking about how nothing lasts and how respect is just like a thing for young people to keep old people at bay. I really would have liked to hear her thoughts on that whole conversation. I feel like she would have had something clever to say. But more importantly, the proposal, which is obviously a huge part of the episode, all this Dany Jon stuff, and the way this plays out with Bran and Sam at the end is pretty much the main thrust of the episode, as far as what we weren't sure how things were going to play out. I think a lot of the reunions and things like that, we had a sense of how it would go. Not that there weren't a lot of surprises. But anyway, we'll get to that. Let's see, another super chat. Token Joe says, do you think Dany will give up her crown to save her people? Love the stream. Keep kicking ass. I do. Actually, I do. I think it's somewhat foreshadowed. I think a great point, Sean, you made years ago was that Jon sought responsibility and got power, and Dany sought power and got responsibility, and she's adapted to that. She's grown into it. She's matured into it, and that may be a place where she finds herself. What do you think?
I'm torn. I really don't know. I think she should. It makes sense that she should, but I think she probably will, but I think it's going to be similar to Lyanna and Sansa and everyone accepting Dany, right? She won't just instantly be like, what? I'm not really the queen? What? You're my cousin? Who said? This kid from the... Okay, I guess you're right. I give up all my... You know, it won't be just this instant acceptance.
Nephew, Sean.
What's
Nephew. Nephew.
Oh, nephew, yes. Nephew.
The voice of correction. The soft voice of corrections. I love it.
I think there will be a
I'm trying
struggle.
to be extra gentle so I don't jolt anyone suddenly and scare them. Or you guys.
But what I'm maybe a little more suspicious of is whether the choice will come to her / be forced on her. Like, it might not matter if they just get married, or if one of them gets killed, or if Jon, whatever. I can imagine all these scenarios where she might still just be queen anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Super chat from LMC. Great question here. Or not question, but comment. Sansa and Tyrion's first topic of convo should have been, did you kill Joffrey? That would have been funny. I think they both are pretty clear on that they had nothing to do with it. Like, Tyrion knows Sansa couldn't have pulled that off, although she was involved. But it obviously wasn't. Yeah. Her strings were being pulled. But that would have been a good conversation for them to have, to just talk that out. Like, what happened? Tyrion would probably be curious. Like, why? How did you get away? And what? I don't think he knows exactly. He probably knows that she went off to the Vale. He has to know that, but he's got to be short on some of the details.
He potentially could or should have found out from Jaime. He met with Jaime after that.
That's true,
right? To set up the meeting in the Dragon Pit and everything.
I can see why they wouldn't have talked about that because it's not really relevant to their conversation, but they might have. And there's other ways he could have found out too. I mean, it's not like it's a secret anymore.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
But he doesn't necessarily know it all. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, they haven't been together. Let's talk about Jon and Arya. That was really, really fun scene. We knew it would be a bit of a tearjerker seeing their reunion. But it was a little surprising, not in a bad way, but a little bit of how it went down was a little surprising. It also thought I had some interesting foreshadowing in it. First of all, Arya tells Jon how smart Sansa is, which is cool. It really puts to rest fully the idea that there could be any remaining animosity between Sansa and Arya. And I like that as awkward as that plot was last season, I like the place that it has us in now. Because Arya's fears were assuaged. She was worried or concerned that Sansa was not for the family. She was still like a Lannister, part Lannister, or just not fully bought into the Starks. And wasn't prioritizing things properly and was maybe being a bit presumptuous with, taking their parents' bedroom and all that stuff. But Arya got to see very clearly that Sansa is smart and a good leader and that she handled that Littlefinger situation well once all the facts were laid out. And they realized that Littlefinger was playing them. So that actually had the effect of kind of bringing them closer together, I think, in a way. And they maybe are as close as they've ever been. Like, they weren't close as kids, so...
A lot of times going through conflict, you come out stronger.
Yeah, and in this case, they both proved each other. They both proved themselves to the other. Like, Sansa realizes how... has respect for Arya's abilities, and Arya did not have respect for Sansa's abilities at first, but does now. And has respect for her loyalty. So that's good.
To be fair, some of that might come from Sansa letting Arya do what she wants,
That's true. They both have, learned to respect each other and understand each other more. I think that's pretty valuable. So Jon may not be king in the North anymore, but as we talked about last in one of our preview episodes, he is still the king of the Brooders, and that is well continued here. This is another callback, channeling Ned a bit from season 1, episode 1, when Ned is in front of the weirwood cleaning ice, right before he finds out about Jon Arryn. Their postures are different. Jon's facing the tree, Ned's sitting facing the pool, and Catelyn comes in to give him bad news, and Arya showing up is certainly not bad news, but it definitely has a little bit of that feel of that same scene. And Jon does channel Ned a lot in general, and here he channels him a bit more than I would have liked. Not in a bad way. I think it's realistic, but it's almost a little. He almost talks down to her a little bit. To be fair, he has no idea what she went through, and he couldn't possibly fathom it. But on the other hand, he says says how Bran is almost a man, or is a man, and Bran says almost. But he still kind of treats Arya like a little sister, which I think he's going to learn pretty quickly that she's a badass. But he does not really know at all what her capabilities are. He's seen Sansa's capabilities, but he doesn't really know about Arya yet, and that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was some reading between the lines there. She was almost talking down to him too. She doesn't really know what he's been through either.
That's a good point.
And I think that will be a conflict that continues, this idea of loyalty to the family versus saving the realm.
Yeah, and she did say that to him. Just remember, when he's like, I'm, blah 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 about family, and she says, just remember that you're, remember who you are, or whatever. I can't remember the exact wording, but
yeah. She said something like something or other, our family. And he's like, my family too. And she says, don't forget that. And there's kind of this implication that at some point you might have to choose to save my life or honor the queen, the dragons or whatever, right? And so it does make sense that he would want to honor his family. He's known Arya his whole life. He cares about her, their blood, on and all these reasons. But also, there's a freaking magical army of undead coming to kill everyone. You know, you might have to, you know, sacrifice his sister's life so that the Queen of Dragons can save the realm. That's like a conflict that might happen. And it's also a conflict that's been around before. Specifically, I really appreciated that there was like this moment early on in the series when something kind of clicked in my mind, this meaning, this symbolism, whatever. The house words of Tully were
Family, duty, honor.
Family, duty, honor, right? And it's not just that it's family, duty, honor. That seems like, oh yeah, these like righteous concepts. But it's specifically family first, then duty, and honor last. And Ned was valuing honor above
good point.
family and duty above family also. Like he felt he had this duty to the king and to the realm to go be hand. So he left his family. Does that make sense? Like he had the order, like, assuming it is correct to say family, duty, honor, you know, assuming that's correct. And it might be correct in some scenarios, not all. But anyway, you know, Ned had a different order than the Tullys did. And but he kind of flipped. Varys kind of convinced, was like, look, Sansa, your daughters, their lives are more important than your honor. Okay, like sure, you're not worried about your life. Sure, Ned, you can put your life ahead of your honor ahead of your life, but are you going to put your daughters' lives ahead of your honor? And Ned's like, okay, and he goes and confesses to being a traitor and da. So Jon might be faced with similar dilemmas, right? Honor and family versus the good of the realm, duty. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Jon is, I think, placing duty above honor. He doesn't care about his family name or his being king or any of this stuff. He's just trying to save everyone's life. Jon's putting duty first.
Yeah.
And Arya is telling him family first.
Okay, that's
And
a good
I think
take.
that conflict's going to happen. I
That's
think
a
it's
very
going
good
to,
take.
you know.
Yeah, and I think that's actually going to touch into possibly when we get into talking more about Bran, which is obviously one of the major parts of this episode. Some people call Bran the most important character of the episode.
Real quick, I will say that Izanami037 points out that for Ned Stark, they think family's first for him. Jon Snow is proof of that.
Okay, that's fair. He did.
He protected Lyanna Stark,
to Lyanna, yeah.
and that was a way of protecting family.
I think what you could say is that
potentially.
himself, he puts his own honor first, but if it's his own honor versus his family, then he chooses his family.
Yeah.
But he carries himself as an individual. Maybe he puts his own honor first. You could maybe say it that way.
Also, and I do like that point, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but on some level, that was also duty. There was some amount of duty to his sister.
Duty to
which is
family.
kind of like duty to your family is, I don't know.
Those are related. Yeah, you're right. And it's honorable to be dutiful to your family, blah, blah, blah. These concepts have a lot of overlap.
And it could be on a sliding scale at different moments. They might matter differently, right? Like Ned, faced with the Night King, might have said, "Oh, sorry, family. Sorry, honor. Sorry." You know, like, we got to go fight the Night King.
None of them had to face that. That's a good point. Okay, so let's talk about this then. One of the beginnings of this scene, which I thought was really interesting. There's a couple. This is where I think there's maybe a little bit of foreshadowing here. Jon says, "How did you sneak up on me?" He's legitimately surprised that she snuck up on him in the snow. And that's just a reminder of who she is. It's like, Jon, you have not learned about how dangerous and amazing she is. And you're going to.
Just want to say real quick, Qyburn snuck up on Bronn too, man. That was pretty, he's a stealthy dude.
Yeah, maybe he was using the some secret passages or something.
Bronn was a little bit distracted, though.
Fair
Sean.
enough.
To be fair,
enough,
yes,
yeah.
that's a good point. Jon was in deep brood. I mean, how could he? He was in the werewood. But then Arya responds with, "How did you survive a knife through the heart?" And he says, "I didn't." And well, they do have some things to learn about, and I wonder how she heard about that. There's plenty of ways she could have heard about it, maybe talking to Sansa or something like that. But I do wonder exactly who told him, or who told her, rather.
I also imagine Arya might be a little more exposed to rumors, if you will. Like, she was out with the people on the streets when the procession was coming through.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
very
she
good point.
Probably in general is spending less time around court. You know what I mean?
She's
It just
off
doesn't
lurking
interest
somewhere.
her.
Yeah.
And so she maybe is more likely to have her finger on the pulse of the common man, who would definitely, any rumors about that would just spread like crazy. So
Super chat from Infamous 1503. Bran seems to be moving events and people in a certain direction. He was waiting for Jaime for a particular reason. Seems that Jaime will play an important role. Any ideas what that could be? We've been thinking about that a lot, and it's difficult because Bran's motivations are tricky. It seems like his motivations boiled down simply to defeat the Night King, but what elements he thinks are important in winning that fight that's the part that I think is really hazy. And it is kind of hard to see why Jaime is important, because Bran doesn't seem to have the ability to have a lot of animosity. Like, I really maintain confidence that Bran's not going to be mad at Jaime for what he did. But on the other hand, I don't have a great answer to why Bran is sitting there like he literally sat outside for like 2 days straight waiting for an old friend. You know, and he said he said that kind of sarcastically without the sarcasm in his voice, but it's clearly a sarcastic comment because Jaime is not an old friend. So
I had a different perspective on that. I thought he was, I guess he was waiting for Jaime too. I guess maybe your perspective is wrong. I just thought of Sam as also the old friend. He had a couple reasons to sit out.
No, because he
there.
stayed there afterwards. He said, I'm waiting for an old friend, and he didn't leave when Sam, like, he was still there the next day when Jaime showed up.
My instinct also was that he was talking about Sam, but then after like the third rewatch, I started to think, oh, he might have been talking about Jaime. It could be both easily.
Me too. I first thought it was Sam, but then upon reflection, I'm like really confident he was talking about Jaime. And that's how this episode ends, with him staring right at him, you know, and in the exact same spot he was waiting.
Yeah. I have a few other thoughts on this, but they might be tied up in other things we get to later.
Okay,
I don't mind talking about it now, but
yeah, I think we should. You should weigh in on what you think what Jaime's role will be. We'll come back to Bran's role and his impact on the other characters, but this Jaime thing, I think, is separate enough that we can talk about it now.
Well, yeah, I guess so, but I think that it's more. My comments more are on Bran and his motivations, and how they might relate to Jon and other stuff too.
Well, yeah, okay, we'll wait on that then. All right, so the next super chat is Danny Jeter Sr. Danny Jeter Sr. I got his name wrong last time too. I can't even say the word. Yeah, anyway. I get Sansa and Northern Lord's attitude because they haven't seen the White Walkers, so Danny is just an invader to them. But why is Bran and Sam so caught up in it? Well, that also touches on motivations, and in Bran's motivations we're going to get to in the end of the episode. They're really important, but we don't want to divert from our plan here. As for Sam, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later too, but for him, it's just hurt. He's upset that his family was killed, and he wants to lash out at Daenerys, and he's emotional. And all this happens when he's just found out about the news. And Kyle Lachico super chat says, "Stay back, he has blue eyes." Yes, that was probably the funniest line of the episode, which had a lot of funny lines. It was a funny episode. It did have its moments. We have a live studio audience again. So let's talk about the dragon riding scene as the last scene before our mid-roll break, and then we'll come back and talk about King's Landing and the rest of the northern plots. So yeah, dragon riding. We predicted this would happen quickly. We knew we thought it would happen episode 1 or maybe episode 2, but we definitely took for granted that he would learn his parentage first. I was like, didn't even consider the alternative that he would learn his parentage and then ride a dragon. But he rode a dragon and then learned his parentage, which I don't have a big problem with, but I do think I don't like it, but I wouldn't call that a big flaw. What do you think? You think that was, maybe there's some other reason they did it this way?
Well, that I can think of, it's not something they've pounded into our heads that only Targaryens can ride dragons, or that there's any rule about who can ride dragons. I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, they haven't really said it much on the show, but the showrunners have said it in the behind the episodes, which is awkward. But they also said in the behind the episode that Dickon was older than Sam, which is wrong. So yeah. Maybe that's just butchering a detail. Wouldn't be the first time.
But it could also be a piece of evidence to help Jon or whoever accept that he really is.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's another thought that I had, is that we've even talked about this in the past, the idea that there are certain people who probably should have known about the nature of Cersei's kids.
Yeah.
And maybe even who Jon Snow is. It's something that maybe Littlefinger or Varys, certain characters had enough insight into what's been going on, who's been where, that they might have been able to piece it together.
Maybe not prove it, but have a strong suspicion.
Exactly. So let's just say Littlefinger says, actually, Jon Snow's the rightful heir. So Cersei and Jaime and Ned and everyone just be like, oh, okay, cool, he's the king now. Like, there's gotta be some, possession's 9/10 of the law, and even someone like Ned, who's trying to be honorable, wouldn't just automatically accept something like this. Before you're going to have this huge upheaval and all the traditions and standing laws and positions of power and everything. People aren't just going to be like, oh, okay, just forget everything we've been doing for a whole generation and we'll do something different now, So even Jon, who maybe trusts or should trust Sam, it's still going to be a tough pill to swallow. It's going to take him a minute to accept all this.
Yeah.
And so, again, he like immediately questioned Sam. He's like, "You're telling me that my father, the most honorable man I've ever known, was lying to me my whole..." And there's all kinds of ways to pick that apart, that statement, that stance Jon's taking. But it makes sense that he immediately goes to that, and it makes sense that he wouldn't immediately let go of that. And he knows he can trust Sam. So why in the world are Dany and Sansa and all these Northern Lords, why is everyone else gonna just like, oh, okay, like they still haven't even kind of accepted that Jon bent the knee to Dany. Maybe it'll be a little easier for them to be like, oh, he doesn't have to bend the knee to Dany. Well, he's the actual king. But
Sam has the proof, though. Remember, he has the book that has the proof that Jon is. It's not just his word. And they have Bran, who is, maybe they can think Bran would lie, but they have pretty strong proof.
It's evidence. I don't know if it's proof. And even in a court of law, you might be able to present it as proof. That doesn't mean everyone will accept it as proof to themselves. They can question who wrote the book, what are the motivations of this Sam character, on and on, But I bring all that up because I think that the dragon riding, if only a Targaryen can ride a dragon, and that's something that's known. It is known. Like if that turns out, then that does make it easier for people to accept. Oh, he must be.
Okay.
Look, he's riding that dragon.
I
must
think
really be. That'll be proof.
You raise a good point, but the thing is, they're going to want to believe this because if this proof means that Jon is the king over Dany, they want to believe that. Because they want Jon to be king over Dany. The North wants that. So it's a matter of people believing what they want to believe. If it's something they want to hear, they're a lot more willing to believe it.
So
Dany might be someone that's like, I need to see proof of that. Or like
I think
Jorah and Tyrion might need proof of that because they're on Dany's side. But like Arya and Sansa and Lord Glover and the other Northern Lords would be pretty willing to accept it.
Yep, I agree. Now here, the thing is, there's one other person who won't want to accept it.
Jon himself.
Yeah, exactly. He himself he doesn't want to be king. Yeah. He doesn't want to have to deal with all that, on and on for a million reasons, So
there's a lot more that there's a big part of this that we're going to get to later. So let's just dial it back to the dragon riding for now, and just say that this is also a callback. Dany has her riding scene with Drogo in episode 1, and I wouldn't say it's similar because dragons and horses, pretty big difference. Dany had certainly ridden a horse before, but it's got that same feel of their first ride together, and it ends with intimacy. Drogo and Dany have their first sex right after that riding scene, and of course Jon and Dany have slept together before, but it also ends in intimacy, and it has a callback to Ygritte living in the caves and all that, which. You wonder when she said that, I cringed a little bit like, ooh, that's going to hurt him to hear that. But he kind of played it off. He kind of smiled and was like, we'll be old in 1,000 years, So that was cool. I mean, and when I say cringe, I mean, ooh, that's going to hurt Jon, not like, oh, that was an awkward line. And Sean, you have some thoughts on this scene as well. And we have a great image that you asked Ashay to pull, which is another great comic moment.
Yeah, that's my main thought. I just thought that was so that look when kissing, Jon kind of opens one eye to look, and sure enough, Drogon's just staring him down. What are your intentions with my mother?
So we are part of the fantasy draft that's being run by The Verge, and involves our co-competitors are other presenters at Con of Thrones, Storm of Spoilers podcast. Watchers on the Wall, and Sam Coleman aka Young Hodor, and I'm forgetting one of the other teams. Anyway, we as part of the draft got both.
Who did you say? Watchers on the Wall, Con of Thrones.
I didn't say Con of Thrones team. That's right. There's a Con of Thrones team. That's the one I forgot. Okay. And we drafted Drogon and Rhaegal as part of this, and one of the things you can get points for is if someone watches someone else having sex. We did not get points for Drogon and Rhaegal seeing Dany in that scene because it's not entirely clear whether or not they had sex. But I really wanted those points, but I'm not going to argue.
This time.
Yes. If there's another scene where they're doing that and the dragons are nearby, I think like between the two, we get a point. But yeah, anyway.
I almost don't want to bring this up because I feel like I'm being kind of nitpicky. This is a fun moment. It's a fantasy show, but it's so incredibly reckless for Jon to just jump on a dragon and fly off. Like, No saddle, no experience, no practice. Like,
let me just tell you, Sean, you shouldn't even talk about it more because I'm going to talk about it for way too long on Wednesday's episode because I just can't with it. I can't. It is the most infuriating thing in the whole show, maybe for me at this point. Like, I look at it and it's just terrible.
Dragons have glue necks.
Yeah, I did like the idea that they have some sciencey like sticky necks.
Yeah. The Valyrians altered them to have sticky necks.
Part of the bond, the Talarian blood.
It's a literal bond.
Skin. I don't know, but and it's not just like this practice run. He like dives down. Oh, God, don't get me started. All right.
They just don't have time for him to learn. I understand that I won't defend it, but I do understand that they just don't have time.
Imagine if you had like some SO from another culture, right? You know, some person that came over from North Korea.
Yeah.
And you're like, jump on the motorcycle. Let's take a ride. Like, I've never ridden a motorcycle. Yeah, it's cool. You got this. Like,
I might hop on back, but I wouldn't ride it myself. Yeah. So another funny comment here. I can't recall who said it. I wrote a note in my notes that someone said the term miserable affair. I think it might have been Euron. And to me, that was a callback to season 1, episode 1 again, where we have the term dull affair applied to a Dothraki wedding that doesn't have at least 3 deaths. And I think that was intentional because miserable affair / dull affair, it's a little too specific. Okay, we're at about the halfway point, a little before the halfway point because we started a little bit late. So
you assume that we're only going to be 2 hours. I think we're at the 1/3 point.
I assume too much. Yeah, so we do have a lot more to discuss. As I said at the beginning, we're doing our patron shout-outs a little differently. Most of them will be in the book reader episodes, but we'll do, let's do our, I do want to do our Queen of Love and Beauty shout-outs for this episode. So, Erin, Lady of the Long Desert, names Emma of Starfall the Queen of Love and Beauty in sight of Pods and Men. That's Pods, podcasts, and Podrick, Payne. All kinds of pods around here. And from the depths of Fleabottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer has declared Queen Kari, a Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. Hell yeah. All right, we have lots of Patreon positions open on the Council of the Beard and other slots all over our Patreon. We are going to be raising the price of our Patreon special episodes at the end of the season. So if you want to join up and get our Patreon special episodes for $1, all 3 of them for just $1 a month, now's the time because they'll go up to $5 a month in about 6 weeks. So you got plenty of time to grab those now. But it seems we have an industry now, just about. There are so many A Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones podcasts, and it seems like the standard price is $5 a month for bonus episodes. So we're gonna join that. We're gonna get in line with the rest of our quote unquote industry, but we're gonna give everybody 6 weeks to go through the old way and have the cheaper price. So that is our mid-roll shout out. Let's get back to the episode because there's just so much to talk about, as Sean correctly pointed out.
I would like to point out at this moment that we are just about to crack 800 live viewers.
Whoa. Hell yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. That's great. 800 is really a high number, and we're super enthused that so many of you came to play with us today because that's what this is. We're playing. This is fun.
Last season, I told people if we got 1,000 live viewers, I would dance, and we did, and I did. I didn't expect that we would do it right off the bat in the first episode. I don't know if we can turn this, if it has to happen, I don't know. But
we could just scoot the chairs out of the way. It's much easier to do now than before. So more dancing from Sean if we get to 1,000 during the season. We'll have to come up with something for 1,500 maybe.
I'm also approaching
Aziz
1,000.
dances too.
Oh, God. 1,000 likes.
Yeah, 1,000 likes would be great, and which is also a good reminder. Like the video if you're watching. If you want to, if you like these two gentlemen there or me, like
she thinks I'm a gentleman.
Did we get promoted?
I'm approaching 1,000 followers on Twitter too. By the way, I'll definitely do some kind of dance.
What's your Twitter?
Dancing Sean at Dancing Sean. Follow me.
Follow Sean. Get it done. Okay, so let's talk about some King's Landing stuff before we go back to the north because there's there's a good amount of stuff happening down there. And we could maybe save what might be the best for last. First of all, something that I think almost everybody missed. I certainly missed it. Only came up in the reviewing of the literature and reviewing, reading articles and things like that. A Twitter user at MCL_Scott, as well as Rolling Stone, noticed something very sad about the scene with Bronn. First of all, they mentioned some names about people who were killed in that battle. They mentioned tall, handsome William and that ginger Eddie who had his eyelids burned off. Well, that ginger Eddie was Ed Sheeran, and tall, handsome William was the black-haired guy who said, I really hope I have a daughter, because that actor's name is William Postlethwaite. He's the son of Pete Postlethwaite. I'm probably saying that name wrong, but yeah. Ouch. Damn, poor Ed Sheeran had to delete his Twitter account because of that episode. People just attacked him, which is not a good look for our fandom. I don't assume that any of our listeners did that, but the wider Game of Thrones fandom did that, and shame on them, because whatever you think of Ed Sheeran, he doesn't deserve that. Come on. And he definitely doesn't deserve his eyelids to be burned off. So it's kind of like the showrunners kind of piled on there.
We can either burn your eyelids off or delete your Twitter account. He got both. Jeez.
So I think this scene was a kind of a mix for some people. First of all, shout out to Josephine Gillen, who has been the sex worker character Moray since season 2, and she was in this scene also. Just constant, consistent. Like, talk about a survivor. Almost everyone dies on the show, but she just keeps on lasting.
Was she the one that Qyburn said had a pox? Was that? They didn't answer that question.
I don't think so, because she was the redhead. I think that was the blonde.
Okay.
But I'll have to look again. But that would be sad if they were like, well, we're going to kill her too, actually. So yeah, she's been around for a while. That's pretty cool. So this scene was kind of controversial. Not controversial, but mixed reviews. Some people really don't like it. Some people do. I'm going to reserve judgment on the plot line in general until we see where it goes. But I will say that I think it makes sense for Cersei to do something about Bronn, and it had to be soon. It had to be right away, because Bronn was Jaime's man, and Cersei already talked about how she expected Jaime to punish him for arranging that Tyrion meeting. So she already didn't like Bronn. And she's full of gold right now. If she loses the throne, her debts don't matter. If she wins the throne, her debts don't matter, because she has the throne, and she has infinite time to pay those debts back. So giving Bronn a whole lot of money and her him to get the hell out of there, it can't really go that badly, because the money is meaningless. He either goes north and does the mission, kills her brothers, which is, that's the best option for her, or he just takes the money and runs, which is, oh well, she needs to get rid of him anyway because she can't trust him. So that's not much of a loss, again, because she doesn't need the money. So what do you think about that?
I also think it's kind of a win-win for Bronn.
Yeah.
Right? He goes north, and if, like, the wall's being overrun, the Starks are all killed, he's like, go back, tell Cersei, yeah, I did it, I killed him, like, they're losing anyway, But if he goes back and he can, like, turn a tide, save the friends of his life, add an extra crossbow to the arsenal, and screw Cersei, like he gets to play this however he wants, which is kind of what he's done all along. I want to believe that he over time has actually bonded with Tyrion and or Jaime.
I think he has a little bit.
But even if he's bonded over time with Tyrion or Jaime, it doesn't mean he can't still betray them for money or power or security or whatever. I think that I want to root for him. He's been like one of the more interesting characters to me throughout the course of the show. He's been I don't know. He's like not a good man, right? He has these streaks of evil. It's hard for him to be one of my favorite characters, but he's also entertaining. He's not as evil as Joffrey, and he is entertaining when he's on screen.
He tells jokes. He's funny,
and he's sort of pragmatic. And the same reason that he would betray Jaime or Tyrion is the same reason that he stood up for Tyrion. It's the same reason that he won the battle against Tyrion, because he's not concerned about honor.
He's paid.
He's just what's most pragmatic for myself. How am I going to stay alive? How am I going to get paid? And he's not worried about some honorable method of fighting, right? Like, he fought with honor. The guy just went to the moon door. I'm not worried about honor, right? Mm-hmm. So that same mentality is why he might betray Jaime or Tyrion.
Okay, yeah.
However, I think he might have grown past that mentality, because we saw in the Field of Fire, we saw him risk his own life when he didn't have to. He drops his bag of gold, just keeps moving. He could have just fled from that field. He could have grabbed that gold, but no, he went. He shot at the dragon. So maybe
actually, if I could jump in, I think that's actually potentially some really good writing there. That foreshadowing, Bronn not taking the gold when he in the battle may have been foreshadowing for this scene.
Right. He may, even if he Right, exactly. Right. He may abandon the gold for this bigger cause. I was going to say
He
that
doesn't
Bronn.
have to abandon the gold. He's got it. She gives it. She gave it to him anyway. She paid him in advance. He's going to keep it no matter what.
I wasn't sure about that, but maybe not. No matter what, he might just have to run for his life. He might not be able to lug around hundreds of pounds of gold with him. You know, if he's in some scenario where there's zombies chasing him or whatever.
The logistics of the gold carrying around is a fair point. Yeah,
and it might make him a target. The bandits on the road. You could go on and on with the problems with this, but one or the other. I just wanted to point out that Bronn isn't necessarily motivated by glory either.
Yeah.
Right? And so when he goes to shoot the dragon down with the scorpion, he's not doing it for glory. He's doing it because he's sticking by Jaime's side.
And because he doesn't want the dragon to kill him. Yeah. And he wants his castle. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
he could have just run from the battle and the dragon wouldn't have been a threat.
You're right. No, you're right, though. He's motivated by pragmatism and he's not a coward. So he's like, well, if I can come out ahead in this, it's going to be great for me. And, you know, I think one of the reasons people think this is seen as a little contrived is because they see it as just a vehicle to get Bronn north. Which, I mean, it kind of is, but I think it's set up well enough. It makes sense, as we said, that Cersei has to get rid of him. She doesn't trust him, and she can't just murder him because, for one thing, that's a bad thing if it backfires. For another thing, it's not good for her regime to have, because he's, like you said, people are calling him Lord nowadays. If she just goes and murders one of her lords, like that's not good for her maintaining loyalty from other people. And as harsh as she is, and as she's, you know, she understands that. And she's willing to do that because she's willing to do anything. But she's not just going to do it just because, on a whim. She understands that she needs loyalty.
She also understands he is a legit warrior. You know, if she does want revenge on Jaime or Tyrion, this is a good person to do it. So.
And your point with pragmatism is really excellent because I thought the writing of Qyburn's pitch to him was really good because it was very much a speech rooted in pragmatism. It was like, look, I am what I am today because Cersei rewards good service. Do you doubt that? Do you really doubt that she wouldn't, heavily reward the person who kills her traitor brothers? Like, think about that for a second. Do you think you think I'm lying? It's very convincing. I thought it was a really good pitch. Let's see. We got several questions built up here, so let's take care of these. Blue Duck Umber, do you think that the Night's King message is leftover programming from the Children of the Forest to intimidate the First Men, singling out Lord Umber to show an extinction of a house? I hadn't considered the extinction of a house part, but I wonder if there's like some cousin Umbers out there maybe. But yeah, he was, obviously that kid doesn't have any, sons of his own or daughters of his own. He might have a younger brother even, but let's focus on the first part of that question. We definitely see evidence that the Night King uses fear, that the White Walkers use fear as a weapon. For example, letting Will, the Ranger, escape in the opening scene. That was intended to spread. They obviously could have killed that guy if they wanted to. Like, the guy just throws the head at him, and they're just like, okay, go ahead. Go tell everybody how scared you are.
They let Sam live, too.
No. Actually, that was a misunderstanding. They did not see Sam. That was a poor execution of that scene.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they talk about it. He did not see him. Yeah, it makes it look like he sees him, but he didn't. He's hiding behind that rock.
It looked to me like he looked right at, like as he passed the rock, looked behind him to see him. Yeah, but
I agree. It looks like it was just bad direction on that scene, or confusing direction or editing or something like that. Yeah, but they were adamant that no, he never saw him in the behind the episode or whatever. I thought the same thing. It was only like a year ago that I learned that. That was the same thing as you. I was like, no, he saw him. Why did they? I guess they just didn't care. But no,
I came up with reasons like A, they maybe multiple other times they let someone go. They like want the information to be spread that they're coming. B, they might have thought of him as being insignificant. Like, what's this guy gonna do? Yeah. I also pondered maybe they know Sam has some bigger role. Like in the same reason. This is another point that we might get to later on, but the Night King's had multiple chances where it seems like he could have killed Jon and or Dany and didn't. And so maybe he knows somehow has had some vision of the future that they need to live or need to be there for some other moment. Maybe the same is true of Sam. Who knows? But
by the way, real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Sean, when you did the Bronn scene, you just never told me to put the image up, right?
The crossbow.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Let's talk about that real quick. Put up the crossbow scene real quick because we can talk about that just for a second.
Right.
This is part of what I think is going on with Cersei. This is why she can't just... She wants people to know it was her, kind of like Olenna once wanted Cersei to know it was her that killed Joffrey, and that's how the crossbow accomplishes this. She wants people to know what happens when you betray her. That's the kind of message. She doesn't want the message of, I will kill any lord working under me, which would be what would happen if she just kills Bronn. But people who betray her suffer extreme consequences. That is a message she has consistently wanted to send. And so I think, and that's the only way she can make people know for sure it was hers, if it's that crossbow.
Even her own family.
Weapon. Yeah, even her own family. Yeah. So it really sends the message that she is not playing. So
once again, just this awkward thing Bronn has to deal with, though. Like this big bulk crossbow, these chests of gold, and like remember he doesn't even want to wear armor because it holds him back.
So to finish answering the question, though, I think yes, that is some sort of maybe programming isn't quite the right word, but it fits. I think it's cultural programming or what they were told to hate. Yeah, I think that fits pretty well because that symbol is interesting, and I do think that it's meaningful to them. It's part of their birth, part of their origin. Even though we're not entirely clear on how it fits into their origin, it's clearly associated with their origin. Super chat from National Forest Tourist. That's our good friend Joe. 1776. I get that reference. Tyrion will pay Bronn double. Yeah, I hope so. I do remember that callback. Tyrion did say, if anyone ever wants to, offer to double cross me, I'll pay you double. That was like one of the first things he ever said to him.
I wonder though if it will get to a point where Tyrion can't pay that anymore. Right?
I think he probably can. If
Tyrion doesn't have all the Lannister gold that he used to.
No, but
Dany
he may end
might
up
not
with
be
it.
cool with this.
He may end up with it though. No, yeah. I think Dany would be cool with it.
I suppose he might get it eventually.
I think Dany's fine with, hey, that guy can help us, give him some money. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I think that could work out.
Dany will also have quite a lot of land to give out at some point. If she actually wins, then there's a lot of people who will be dead.
He wants a castle. That's very true.
Yeah.
And
Ron, Lord of Harrenhal.
Don't do that. I didn't know you hated Bronn so much.
Well, since he's getting paid double, he should get the twins, right? That's been a theory that's been around for a while, right?
That's right, yeah.
2 castles. It kind of is 2 castles.
I like that.
I love that fit for 2 castles. He gets the twins.
But if someone's going to break the Harrenhal curse, Bronn can do it.
Sir Dwayne the Jiggly, intimidating name. Do you expect a scene where Varys reacts to Littlefinger's death? That's another one I hadn't considered. I doubt we'll get a whole scene, but maybe there's a scene where it comes up, where he throws out a line or two. What do you think, Sean? I don't know if maybe that's a little too much to hope for, but I would love to get just a couple of lines.
I was going to say, I feel like it would be so easy to just give us one line just to address it. I wish we would get more, but I understand that we're not always going to get it, but we've talked in the past about imagine the types of conversations that Sansa and Jon, Arya and Jon, Bran, and all these characters, all the things that they've gone through. On one hand, it would be such interesting conversations to hear them talk about this, but on the other hand, it would be too much. It's just too much. You can't. It would be literal hours. It took us hours and hours to watch it happen, right? It would take them hours and hours to tell each other about it. They can't show us all that. But it does seem like there's a few key characters, few key moments that they've had that should be discussed, and this is definitely one of them. It seems like if it was going to happen, it should have happened in this episode, but maybe it's not too late. We'll see.
Yeah. Also super chats from John Wiley and Seth Wilkins. Both, one says, I just want to thank you for all you guys do, and good stuff. Thanks. Well, thank you back. You're welcome, Seth and John. From Padfoot Studios. In behind-the-scenes bloopers, after he rode the dragon, Jon says, it's almost as if he knew which direction I wanted to go. I think you can infer from that line that they do have a connection. Yeah, that's a good take. Yeah, I wonder, this behind-the-scenes things, they do say some interesting things sometimes like that, and it does kind of seem like a meaningful comment. A lot of times their comments don't really have that much to do with the show, but that has the feel of real, of connecting. So... But it's still kind of up in the air. Like, what are they going to do with the whole dragon riding bond and how that works? I think I kind of guess they're going to keep it pretty simple. From Met Fan Man. Well, I'm a Braves fan, man, but we can still be friends in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's interesting, by the way, baseball is really getting into Game of Thrones. Here in Atlanta, they had Game of Jones at last Friday, which was former Braves star Chipper Jones on the Iron Throne.
Really?
Yeah. Game of Jones. So anyway, Met fans' question is, long-time listener, first-time payer. Thank you for your hundreds of hours of entertainment you've given us. I'm really hoping you guys redo all those early podcasts with this new equipment after Winds of Winter. That has definitely occurred to us as well. Certainly some of the really early ones need to be redone. Not just because of the quality, but because there's just been more info that's come out. A lot of our early podcasts came out before Fire and Blood and The World of Ice and Fire and Princess and the Queen and the Rogue Prince. And, of course, the TV show has given us some insight into what's going to happen in the books later. You can't go too far with some of those comparisons, but also you can't just say that it has nothing to do with the books at all. So, yeah, I do think that's on tap for sure. And once the books are completely done, certain topics are definitely going to get a full redo. But that's a little bit in the future, shall we say. Let's go back to Qyburn, though. Not just Qyburn's talk to Bronn, but he says a really interesting line here. He says, because Bronn's first thought is that...
I'm sorry. You skipped Super Chats on purpose, right?
Oh, did I? Did I miss one?
Did you not? I thought you didn't say some of the middle ones. I thought you skipped
I got
right
them all.
Okay, you did?
There's none of these that I missed, yeah.
Oh, so I'm sorry. It's hard to keep track.
Bronn first thinks that he's being sent to kill Daenerys, which makes sense for him to assume that. But Bronn says she has other plans for the Dragon Queen.
Qyburn says.
I'm sorry, yes. Qyburn says she has other plans for the Dragon Queen. And this at first is just, okay, of course she does. Of course she has other plans for the Dragon Queen. But then I got to thinking, what does that mean specifically? And it got me thinking, and I have a fun theory here. I think it might mean that she's going to send a faceless man after Arya. Not after Arya, but after Daenerys. And the reason for this, there's a couple of reasons why this idea is supported. For one thing, we know she has the money for it. For another thing, she's got the Iron Bank as an ally. And we also know that Daenerys has Arya as an ally, and the faceless men might still have a grudge against Arya, and that might, not exactly that might encourage them to go after Daenerys if Arya's on their team. So it fits pretty well in that regard that that's how they would deal with Dany. Because, sure, the Scorpion was moderately effective, and if they had a lot more of those Scorpions, you could take down some dragons. But wouldn't it just be a lot easier to kill the Dragon Rider? Assassinate her, and not worry about the dragons? Right? Like, it seems like that could be a fit. And that's certainly the kind of thing Cersei would do. She's obviously willing to have people killed. That's no question there. So there's not a whole lot to suggest this. One other thing that might suggest it is that we're told that some characters that we thought maybe we'd never see again might appear. I have some plot lines that are kind of wrapped up that were maybe left dangling, and this might be one of them. So you could see all the elements are there. However, there's zero pointing to this directly. It is just a theory that fits really well. What do you think, Sean?
I feel similar to you that I didn't think too much into her statement at first, but then when you start to wonder exactly what it is, I didn't come up with that, but I see how that could fit. Like, I don't think there's anything that specifically keeps it from going that direction. But it could also just be as simple as they have 30 scorpions now, and that's enough that it's a legit threat to the dragons. Or even just the idea that she's going to, have the Golden Company and maybe politically turn people against Dany, on and on. We've seen her use propaganda. We've seen her describe, because it's one of the more interesting moments. Because Dany really did kill all those lords, right? It's just hung them up on
the slavers
on the way to right. And so Dany tells that to her small council, like she slaughtered hundreds of lords. So you could see how she might be able to paint Dany in a negative light and keep the people against her.
Especially all the thing with Tarly, the xenophobia. Like, there are people who are really afraid of all those foreigners, and she just brought the savage Dothraki and the eunuch army. Like, it's easy to stoke xenophobia on those fronts.
By the way, that was another little moment that I meant to talk about in the opening sequence when they're coming through. There was in general, they seem to be kind of showing this distrust that the North have, and Jon even says it, but other characters say it. But there was a moment when Missandei specifically, the way they were looking at her, I was like, wow,
they've never seen
shades of racism there.
Yeah. I kind of like that they included that because it's realistic for you want to show that that's a real thing that happens. Like, you people who haven't seen a type of person before, they kind of give them the side eye, and it's got some real world parallels there, and it's like, so but they didn't make it all about race.
Right.
Because they also have that same reaction to Dany. It's not just about race, it's about being a foreigner. Whereas
not even a foreigner, an outsider.
Yes, an outsider and a foreigner. And that's in these very closed cultures, they have no exposure to these other cultures. And it's just like all of a sudden they're being exposed to not just a few of them, but a lot of them. They're an overwhelming number of a lot of them all at once. And it's very different than how we handle things in the real world, because these are armed people, and there's a lot more explicit allowed violence in their culture. So it's almost like, I'm not going to sit here and defend xenophobia, but it's almost like they do have things to be worried about.
Well, if nothing else, some of these people are going to have the same thought as Sansa. What are they eating?
Yes.
I remember the last time
Exactly.
the king came and ate up all our food. What's going to happen now?
Yeah.
Like, never, even if they're not outsiders or foreigners or no racism, this is thousands of people come and eat our food. When winter is coming, it's an issue. So
I agree. That's definitely part of it, and that's why the side eyes are for everyone and not just. But they definitely went out of their way to show that it was some of it was directed at the skin color, which is an interesting way to do it. But also, it makes sense that they would do it that way. Super chat from Jamie McKenna for Ashea being an audio boss. Q, where was Ghost? Thoughts? I feel like Ghost was just, as always, a victim of budget, but we have confirmation he will be in the season. He probably feels a little lonely now that he's been set aside for a dragon. But wolves are loyal. He'll grow into it. I really wish that instead of the fate that Ned Umber had, that they had just given Ghost a saddle and Ned Umber could ride Ghost into battle like a warg rider, like in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, when you say give Ghost a saddle, I thought you meant Ghost could ride the dragon.
Now that's badass. Yeah, screw Jon. Ghost should be riding that dragon.
Imagine a scene of the dragon like swooping low and Ghost jumping off the back and coming down on top of the Night King.
One day, like they're gonna when Game of Thrones franchises become completely watered down by just like overexposure and movies have been made over, and it'll be Game of Thrones 2020 or sorry 2120, and that's what it'll be. It'll be wolves leaping off the back of dragons and shooting lasers out of their eyes. His eyes are red. It's already set up, right? Okay, so let's go to staying in King's Landing. We have the Golden Company arriving, and it seems like they've grown. They're double-sized. I'm pretty sure they said they were 10,000 before, and now they're 20,000, which, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think 10,000 men would move the needle enough for Cersei, but 20,000, that's pretty substantial, especially because these are formidable fighters. These are way better than your average soldier. These are way better than Ginger Eddie and Tall Handsome William as far as fighters go. And I really, and there was a lot of fan service in this episode, but I don't mind fan service if they do it well. And I thought Cersei's complaining about the lack of elephants was a perfect example of fan service done right, because she's a petulant person who's upset when she doesn't get what she wants. So having her complain about, I was told there would be elephants, it's a really good way to channel us.
That's why so much of the audience can relate to Cersei. Petulant people not getting what they want.
Good point.
I also actually did appreciate. I was like, it's kind of like grumbling, But when the guy said, it's hard to ship them, I was like, okay,
that appealed to your logistics.
Yeah, that's fair. That's legit. I wouldn't want the elephants to suffer. It does make sense. It'd be hard to get them on ships and transport them, and I'm okay with it.
So here's a bit of a tricky scene. Well, not this first part. First of all, Euron talking to Yara on his ship. Not so tricky. Commenting on his quote-unquote loneliness. He's obviously just lying about that or just talking. I don't know what right word to use is, but he's not being honest. But he does, interestingly, say how easily he can switch sides again. And as you noticed, he's done everything he said he's going to do. And in this case, he does it immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says he's going to go sleep with Cersei and
go sleep with Cersei. Yep. He told Cersei he's going to bring her a prize. He's lived up to every promise he's made. I think maybe the only thing he hasn't done was something that was a lie in the first place. Yeah. Right? When he said he's going to go back to Iron Islands, he's like, can they swim? Remember when they bring the walker to the dragon pit, he's the first one to get up, walk out, look at that thing, and he says, can they swim? No. He's like, good. I'm going back to my island, and you should too. But apparently that was staged. So other than that's the one thing he said he was going to do, he hasn't done.
Yeah. So the scene with Cersei is interesting because we have this conundrum of a lot of possibilities, and they've kind of created a couple of different forks for the way the plot could go. Euron, of course, is was it good for you? Which is just hilarious, that's just pretty funny. And then she's talking about how Robert was bad in bed, which is like, yeah, of course he was. But the interesting part is the whole issue of her pregnancy. Whether is she still pregnant is one question, and what is she going to do about it if she is or isn't? Okay, so let's imagine that a couple of forks here, like I said. What we saw in the trailer was the last second of that scene where she's got this kind of sad look in her eye, and we assumed that, or not assumed, but guessed strongly guessed, confidently guessed, that she had lost her pregnancy because she was drinking wine, whereas she had refused wine with Tyrion, and that's how he figured out she was pregnant. So the fact that she's drinking again might mean she lost that child, might mean she, if we're getting really dark, it might mean she doesn't want that child anymore because it's Jaime's and she's done with Jaime. But it also might mean that she's just suffering internally because, again, she is going to be passing off a child as someone else's that's actually Jaime's. If she lies, if she goes through with this and tells Euron that this is his kid, right? Because Euron wants a kid from her, and she has the opportunity to lie and say that this is his kid when it's actually Jaime's, which is all too familiar and painful for her. So it's really interesting. I think that's something that kind of got lost in the shuffle there as a possibility, but it's also confusing. So let me hear what your take on that, Sean.
I agree. There's all these if-thens about it. Is she drinking wine because she's already lost the baby? Or is she drinking wine because she's decided she's going to abort the baby?
Or is she just maybe just a little bit of wine because she just had sex? It's going to be something really mundane like that.
I wouldn't read anything into it except that they told us that we should read something into it last season when she didn't accept the wine from Tyrion. Then Tyrion realizes that she's pregnant. You know, I believe they're using that as a clue for us. And so I'm trying to figure out how to read that clue, and it could be a lot of ways. And the fact is, any of them are tough for Cersei.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Whatever it is, it's a tough scenario for her. Some of them maybe are... Like, for example, the fact that she's, like, sending Bronn off to kill Jaime means that maybe she doesn't care as much about him or hiding his son from him, da-da-da. But not caring as much doesn't mean not caring, right? Just because she's decided that she needs politically to kill Jaime doesn't mean that she doesn't love him. Does that make sense? I see a million, and it's part of why she's such a great actor that so many different... emotions can be swirling around in her, and she just like drips them out with the subtlest moves of her lips or her brow. You know, she's
really good at it. She's amazing at looking stern and showing how her mask crumbles just a little bit.
Yeah,
she's so good at that.
By the way, going through rewatch, a couple moments that stood out in my mind is just incredible acting bits from her. Watch them even more closely and realize one thing she does. One of her techniques is closing her lips. She sometimes will have her lips slightly separated and slowly close them.
That's cool.
It creates a shift in the emotion that her face is putting across.
She and Jaime with their facial reactions are just like incredible. And Jaime had a great one this episode too when he sees Bran staring at him. He's like, it's another classic Jaime. A slow, I love those. Matthew Hoar super chat says, how do you think Dany is going to deal with Jaime? Well, yeah, I think she's going to accept him. I think there's going to be some stern talking to, but she's got to accept him. I don't think she's going to push anyone away. I think there's going to be too many people arguing for him, like Brienne and Tyrion.
Is this something that we want to dive into now, or are we going to cover it later?
We can talk about
the whole topic.
We can talk about it now. We shouldn't talk about it too much before we, because we're going to see it next week probably. So just give your thoughts on if you think there's anything that maybe we haven't discussed already. But we do have a lot left to cover. So yeah,
I think fundamentally there are going to be characters who have good reason to be upset with him. And again, this is going to start to get into Bran stuff, which I still want to hold off on.
Okay.
But there are also going to be a lot of characters who will want to defend him. And we talked about in our preview episode that you might expect there to be a trial by combat.
Yes.
Except that Tommen banned it, so we can't.
And everybody is going to, everybody follows Tommen's decrees, as we know.
Yeah. But it seems like, on one hand, everyone's just kind of getting on board with the big picture mission, and so it might be a little easier to accept them, especially if characters that people will look to for leadership or guidance will be okay with it. Like, I can see Tyrion being okay with it. I can see...
Tyrion can point out how well he outgeneraled him. He's like, look, this guy just kicked my ass with strategy. We could really use him.
Yeah, Jon might be okay with it. The thing is, some of the people being okay with it might be all the more reason to be suspicious. Like, Dany has questioned Tyrion on how well he's doing strategically against his own family.
Sansa will be very suspicious, I think, because Sansa's already, really worried about Cersei in general and is worried what she'll do. And, I don't know that she'll trust Jaime.
Some groundwork has been laid. They've already been warned that the Lannister army is coming.
Yeah.
So maybe psychologically some people prepare to deal with this or this type of thing.
Well, he's going to presumably tell them that they're not coming, and
right.
will be Sansa will be like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But Tyrion will be like, some people might think he's lying.
Yeah.
But probably not. I think most people will believe him. I'm sorry?
But I think
the same thing I would be telling you every time I interrupt, which is closer, Aziz, and not directed another way.
I think that that it'll be initially struggle and turmoil, but people will reluctantly accept it. And then we'll get to this moment, an episode or two from now, where everyone just doesn't care anymore about whether or not he's a Lannister or whether he's a Kingslayer. None of that. We just need bodies on the field to fight. So,
right on.
Live bodies on the field to fight.
Question from Token Joe. I could be wrong, but haven't the Unsullied defeated the Golden Company before, or was it another sellsword army? Actually, it was the other way around. This is book canon. I don't think it applies to the show, so it probably doesn't matter. But the Golden Company was stiffed by Qohor on a payment, and they sacked Qohor, and the Unsullied are... Qohor has long employed Unsullied to defend it, so that implies the Golden Company defeated the Unsullied garrison. So I don't think that's come up in the show, though. Really quickly, we're going to talk about the Asha rescue. It was one of the weaker points of the episode, probably. It was just so easy. It wasn't really a big payoff, but I understand because it's just not that important of a plot in the first place. So on the other hand, I don't mind them not spending a lot of time on it. You know what I mean? And it had something really fun, which is that it had several cameos all at once. Mac and Dennis from It's Always Sunny, and Martin Starr from, well, lots of things, including Party Down, and what's probably the most famous thing he's been in?
Probably Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, yeah, that's a really big one. So he's really funny. So that was
and
cool.
Of course, Freaks and Geeks.
Oh yeah,
Freaks and
Geeks, classic. And so we see here that Yara's intent on taking back the Iron Islands, which she believes she can do because Euron is busy on the other side of the continent. It would have helped if she had stolen Euron's flagship there, but I can see why they couldn't.
That might have given away.
It's plausible why she couldn't for several reasons, but I'm just saying it would have been nice.
I also felt good that I nailed it on the preview.
You
by
did.
the way, that was going to be Theon's ship.
Very good. You're right. You did. And Theon wants to go north, which is maybe a little bit of a surprise. The surprise is that he's able to do it so soon, but that's because they wrapped this plot line up. And he's not in the trailer anywhere in the north. So we didn't have that advanced knowledge of him being there.
I do wonder if there might be more to read into the statement that she made. They'll need a place to retreat, right?
Yeah,
if things go
fair
sour. And I wonder if that might even be... I can imagine this being a direction things go.
Ships would be a really good way to escape.
Load all the commoners onto ships. Send them to Iron Island. Send all the warriors to King's Landing for a last stand.
Whoa. That's really all hands on deck. that's something. I like it. We'll have to see. All right, so let's talk about down in the forges. Back to Winterfell. Arya has her pretty brief reunion with the Hound. I don't know that they had a whole lot to say. Maybe they could have said a little more than that, but I'm not sure they had a whole lot to say to each other. But I can understand why someone would have wanted it to be more, like a little more meaning to that scene. And we have Arya getting to talk to Gendry very straightforwardly, which is nice, right? That's maybe foreshadowing. If you hope for happy endings, that's a couple that could be. Yeah, but I don't know if we hope for happy endings, so I don't know if it's... Well, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
There's some earlier foreshadowing.
Yeah.
There was a scene as they were approaching the Red Wedding when the Hound said something to kind of dig at Arya, something about Ned being killed. She stared him down. She said, "One day, I'm going to run a sword through your eye socket and out the back of your head."
Oh, I was talking about Gendry, not Samwell.
Gendry. Sorry, I got distracted.
But no, that is a good point. You're right. But you should continue with that point.
Yeah,
because
I worry that Sandor's not going to make it. That she is going to do that
when he's
going to be a zombie. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But there's another piece of interesting foreshadowing here. It's not just... First, we're going to talk about Arya's staff in a second, but before that, I think this is sneakier. We have Sandor's axe, which, for one thing, a dragonglass axe clearly means that obsidian in this world is a lot stronger than the real world, which is... I'm not complaining at all. It just wasn't necessarily clear before. It was, well, to be fair, it was sort of clear given Jorah, because Jorah was just repeatedly stabbing zombies and whites and the polar bear with his dragonglass daggers, and they never broke. He killed just tons and tons of whites, so they're clearly stronger. But an axe, still, it's pretty surprising to see a whole axe out of it. But he makes this interesting comment. He says, "I'm getting better at this," which to me says he's going to keep getting better, and that's going to result in, I don't know, what? Our first guess was maybe Valyrian steel, but why? Why do they need more Valyrian steel? Obsidian is really effective already, so I'm not sure. What do you think? Maybe my other idea was dragonglass scorpion bolts to shoot down Viserion, but I don't know. What do you think?
One of my thoughts was that even though they don't need it per se, based on what they've shown us so far, it'll still be like this cool thing. You know what I mean? We could just have this magnificent 7 warriors all equipped with Valyrian steel blades, and that'll be exciting. You know what I mean? That'll be good storytelling, good imagery, whatever, even if it's not really kind of necessary. And another thing is, and there's a lot of kind of like nitpicking here, they might not just be consistent with how they present the dragon glass or how it works or whatever. But the thing about obsidian is that it's I want to say fragile. I don't know if that's quite the right word. Compared to steel, at least, it's sharp. I mean, it's a rock, you know. But if you had a steel sword and an obsidian sword and they clashed against each other, the obsidian would shatter. But if you stab the obsidian into flesh, it'll just stab through it. Does that make sense? It's not.
That's real world obsidian, though. We can't make that assumption about this.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I didn't pay enough attention to what Jorah was doing, but I don't think he was like parrying blows.
Well, no, they don't. Most of them don't even have weapons.
Right. He's just stabbing through into flesh. And so I could see how that might last. But if they might need to go trade blows with White Walkers who have swords, then obsidian might not work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so then Valyrian steel might be necessary. So I can see some like convoluted explanations or justifications for how it works or has worked or will work. But I think it might just come down to, it's freaking cool, man. You know, like, they've just given this lore to the Valyrian steel. They've talked about it. Key characters have it. If Gendry can make more, it'll be a cool thing to do. So.
We'll have to see, yeah. But one thing, the bottom line being, I think that line is meaningful as some sort of foreshadowing or predictive element. So we'll have to see. Keep an eye on that one.
Also, another thing that might be necessary that hasn't existed in a long time to make Valyrian steel is Dragonfire. I happen to have Dragonfire right now, so all the pieces are coming together.
That's true. Now, the recipe, quote unquote, for for Valyrian steel is a little more complicated in the books, but again, don't get ahead of yourself, folks. That's not necessarily how it works in the show.
Sam could read something in a book.
Yeah, I was going to say, I meant to mention that and forgot, but yeah, Sam's books could absolutely give the last bit of information that Gendry may not have. Because Gendry did work in a forge with a guy who knew how to reforge Valyrian steel, so he's got that connection already. Okay, so next point here is Arya's detachable staff thing. That's cool. We got Shea has an image of her plans, and we were fooled by this in the trailer. I thought that she had a spear and that it broke, because later she's fighting with just the end of it. But clearly this is by design. In fact, we see the design right here. So I also hoped it was a 2-bladed staff, like blades on either end, so we could get like a Simeon Star Eyes thing. But no, it's clearly from the image there, just one blade. So that's cool. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on it, but Arya she's a skilled fighter and she has a weapon in mind that she thinks is going to be perfect for her. And
my main thought is that this shouldn't be a special weapon for Arya. All the Unsullied should get one. This should just be the way they make them, right? Like,
yeah, maybe. Well, the Unsullied probably have longer spears.
I will say, I don't think this is the case, but isn't it possible? I mean, she says, "This is my wish." And her wish could be for all of the troops to be outfitted like this.
At least key troops.
Maybe.
Key troops. But, you know, if you look at what she says, she does say, you know, "This is my wish," which made you think it's for her specifically, and it is, but there's an out.
I could see us seeing that in the next episode, because the Unsullied, in the trailer, we see the Unsullied equipped with dragon glass, but that hasn't happened yet. So maybe the episode 2 is when they, you know, bring that up and outfit them that way and have that discussion or something.
Maybe even could be part of Gendry getting better.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about Last Hearth. This was a spooky scene, but also a callback to the very, very first scene of the entire series, where you have wildlings and Night's Watch. You have dead bodies arranged in that same distinct pattern, the spirally sort of pattern. You have the shrieking of the whites. You have someone turning around to find a child white alive right behind them. And there's also a couple other things that are similar, and we were faked out by the trailer on this one as well. We thought Sandor was part of this. By the way they edited the trailer, we thought Sandor was there, but he's not. We also thought it was probably one of the castles on the wall, but it was not. Not a big difference from it being a castle on the wall to Last Hearth. They're not that far from each other. But in general, what do you think of this scene? Pretty creepy and pretty fun. Had a little comic relief with maybe some people's favorite line of the episode. His eyes are blue. My eyes are always blue.
It's also a good way to bring those characters back into the fold and to maybe connect some different movements that need to happen, right? Just the recognition that the Night King's coming. Like Bran got the vision, but we know that these people, the characters on the wall, don't need to be there, right? There's no wildlings north, if they were even needing to be worried about that. There's no White Walkers north. There's no need to have troops on the wall anymore. So pull everyone in. It's good to know, to be clear that Tormund and Beric are alive, etc.
Right on. Okay. Well, let's move on to possibly the most important stuff of the episode. Maybe we saved the best for last here. Sam and Dany and Bran and Jon's reveal of his parentage. Okay, so it starts. It's kicked off by Sam and Dany and Jorah having their scene in the library, which is a couple people have pointed. I think it's pretty widely agreed upon that Sam's acting was the show stealer. If anyone stole the show with their acting, it was Sam or John Bradley this episode. And I thought the writing was really solid for this episode too, or for the scene at least. Sometimes I think the dialogue overall in this episode wasn't great, but they accomplished a lot of good plot points, which is a common complaint about the show is they move the plot line in certain ways without the dialogue being up to par. But in this, I don't really have any trouble with the dialogue in this scene. And it really does show the reality of abusive parents in kind of a harsh way, which is to say that I think a lot of people didn't agree with Sam's reaction to his father's death. They expected him to be almost relieved or to be happy or at least nonplussed. But that's just not realistic. Abusive people, kids still love their abusive parents. It's very common for a son or daughter to still, even after years of abuse, decades of abuse, to still hold out hope that they can be worthy in the abusive parent's eyes. And of course, that very well describes Sam. He was just not good enough for Randall, and Randall made that clear day in and day out. And really, Dickon wasn't that bad either. And plus, there's the matter of Sam's family, which, even if he didn't love his father, he loved his mother and his sister or sisters. I forget how many he has on the show. But they're now without, their protector, their father figure, etc. So it's a pretty big deal. So let's pause it there and give me your thoughts before we go on to the next step here.
One thing that's worth noting is if someone had just come and told Sam, hey, Dany just killed a farmer and his son. Just random people that Sam didn't even know. Like, oh, okay, whatever. You're like, that's still pretty sad. You know,
you brought up earlier the killing of the slavers. Like she's done some pretty bad things, but those things do not personally affect Sam. That's not his family. Like, sure, you can look at it objectively and say, and like Tyrion did. Tyrion Varys had the discussion. It was like, she's bordering on doing some atrocities here. We gotta make sure we dial that back.
Even if it's justified, even if they're bad people. Like Jon had a hard time killing Janis Slint. He still had to pull himself together and decide to do that. You know? And so in the same way, it might be hard for someone to kill these people. It's going to be hard even if they deserve to, right?
Yes.
It might be hard for someone to accept their died. If it's your own family, I think it's totally understandable for him to...
If I could also just say real quick, just to balance this out a little bit, some people forget that's one common complaint I've seen is that Dany should have sent Randall Tarley to the wall. She did try to send Randall Tarley to the wall. He refused it. He said, "You're not my queen. You can't send me there." Yeah. So that was not an option anymore. So she tried to do that. But that gets lost in the shuffle. No one knows that she made that offer.
And also, there was almost maybe this expectation that Jon knew. Like, Sam went to Jon. He was like, oh, she didn't tell you. Like, Dany didn't think she needed to tell Jon.
Why would she tell? Yeah, like, I executed some rebellious lords. Like, why do I need to tell you that? Yeah.
She didn't know that this relationship was there or anything. So,
and that's part of Sam's just emotional trauma here. He's just found he's not necessarily being fully reasonable about what Dany could have done differently. He's got a point that she didn't have to kill them, but A, he doesn't have all the information, and B, why? Like you said, there's just some of these things that don't make sense. Like, why would she have told Jon that?
And Jon or Sam's point of view might reflect some other people's point of view too, that us as viewers can see this bigger picture, right? And Danny or us as viewers maybe don't have personal connections, but to people, like just the average people, that certain characters seem to be worried about. Varys, Jon, ostensibly Danny.
Yeah.
They're going to have emotional reactions to death and violence. There was this plan that Tyrion and others were trying to say, like, it's Jon even told Danny, like, look, if you want, you could just riot in and burn everyone, but then you're more of the same. You're trying to prove you're different,
Yeah.
And you could see how here and there, some individuals, I mean, this is true in the real world too. It doesn't matter what treaty, two countries make amongst each other. Somewhere over in Israel, like, that guy killed my uncle. Those people killed my uncle. There's going to be individual people with personal vendettas. And it's going to be difficult to win people over through the course of a war, through the course of violence. As an outsider, all these things are going to be issues. And if they can be issues for someone that we like and care about, and it seems honest, trustworthy, educated, whatever, like Sam. If Sam can have this negative reaction to actions of Danny, it makes sense that other people will too,
Yeah,
and that'll be an issue. How big it is, that does it mean that Danny's some villain? No, okay, but it doesn't mean that everyone automatically accepts everything Danny wants to do, or that Danny maybe needs to be more careful about what she does. We might be seeing a little hint of that here.
Yeah, well said. So he runs. He's in his hurt state here. He runs outside and runs into Bran. Almost gets run over by a carriage. That would have been a sad end for Sam. And then runs into Bran, and Bran. This is when we really start to get the sense that Bran is definitely becoming a manipulator. Not necessarily for bad. I assume it's because he's focused on defeating Night King. But it's interesting that he's becoming like almost like the book version of Bloodraven. More familiar to show watchers only, he's almost becoming like a Varys, where he gets people to do things without them knowing what his larger endgame is. Now, of course, in the books, Varys actually has sort of a good intent with all this, at least in his mind. In the show, it's a bit different. But we'll talk about that more on Wednesday. But
at least Varys has a sense of humor, though, about it all.
Yes, Bran is not really so funny. He wasn't really funny before he fell or went into the tree, because 9-year-olds aren't known for their senses of humor or being really funny in that sense.
Brooding runs in Stark blood.
That's very true. So
even Sansa and Arya, like really all of them.
So there's a couple. Yeah, it's true. There's a couple of questions here. First, a simpler or maybe harder to answer question, but less relevant to the main episode here. Why was he staring at Tyrion? There's that scene where Tyrion looks over and he sees Bran staring at him. And why? I don't get that. Maybe Tyrion's... I imagine Tyrion's thinking to himself, I know I didn't do all that dagger BS. Yeah. And I made you a saddle. So I wonder what's up. Like, it certainly put Tyrion off, but Tyrion probably is like, why is he staring at me? So, and I don't know either. Do you have any take on that?
Not specifically Tyrion, but this is a thought that I have, is it moments when Bran is staring at... Let me back up a little. Bran, I try to make this analogy in our preview episode too, that Bran ostensibly, quote unquote, knows everything, right? But it doesn't mean he can process all the information.
Yeah,
right?
True.
Let's say that right now someone gave you the access to the camera on everyone's computer. Okay, do you suddenly know what everyone's doing? You can't see all those images at once. You can't process. Which cameras do you look at? Especially if you had access to the camera on everyone's computer all at once? Now and before and in the future.
He also has a lack of understanding of human emotion. He started this as like a 10-year-old and he never got to like have relationships or you do all that stuff.
So when and where do you look? It's just too much information to absorb. If someone from 1,000 years ago was transported through time and space to the Library of Congress right now and was told, hey, cure to the plague is in there. Well, they're just going to suddenly find the cure to the plague in 5 minutes. They might be in there for months trying to find a cure to the plague. Bran doesn't necessarily understand how to sort through and process all this information he has. Now, one thing that might happen is when he looks at a person, he might be able to direct his thoughts towards that person's history, knowledge, past, and so on, right?
Interesting.
So I wonder, for example, if that moment that kind of creepy moment when he told Sansa, you look so beautiful in that dress. I wonder if Bran was looking at Sansa just then in that moment, right?
Mhm.
Sansa came into his field of vision, and then Bran was flooded with images of what's gone on with Sansa, and then said it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Not that
It
he's
does,
been
yeah.
like creeping on her all along.
Of course, yeah.
Of course, I'm just speculating on all this, but
No, it makes
I
sense.
think it does make some amount of sense. It makes
fits,
Bran
yeah.
To
Bran
interject real
seem a
quick?
little less creepy.
I think that's a great idea, especially because I'm really not a fan of the obvious that like, obviously they directed Isaac Hempstead Wright to act as if he were blind. Like the way he is looking off, he is doing that. And that's a choice. It's a choice I don't love because it makes him seem too detached and distant and is just awkward to me. But when you put it into the terms of what you're saying, which is that he really is just completely... I still don't love it, but anyways, I like your idea, Sean.
Yeah. And so he, at that moment when he's looking at Tyrion, he might be scrolling through. He might be seeing, oh, that wasn't the dagger. He did try to help Sansa, da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
He might be assessing Tyrion. Okay, he's someone who's good or trustworthy or whatever.
That makes sense. Okay. I mean, it could be something else, but that certainly fits. Yeah. But getting back to the main plot here with Jon and Sam, it's very interesting that Bran seems to have chosen this very specific moment to push Sam into doing into the reveal for Jon, which is really interesting. He's like, this moment when Sam is feeling particularly traumatized and vulnerable, he's like, now you got to tell him. And that's really interesting. And it gives all these questions, creates all these questions. Why? First of all, why does Jon need to know who he really is? What is the benefit? How does that help everyone defeat Night King if everyone knows, and if Jon knows, that he's half Targaryen? How does that help? And there's a couple of guesses here, and then we'll get your takes on these. My first thoughts were, I have no idea. But then we got some ideas from out on Twitter and from other fandoms and some other ideas on my own, just thinking about it. The most obvious thing, I think, is that he doesn't want Jon and Dany to marry, because this is the most obvious thing that puts a wedge between them. And that's something that's been put on the table by Davos's comments. They're like, let's get them to marry. And of course, everybody can see that they're having a relationship. But that brings up another question. Why does he not want Jon and Dany to marry? If they're united in one regime, that seems to be helpful. But on the other hand, there's a lot of consternation about Daenerys being in charge. Maybe they just would rather, maybe Bran thinks that Jon needs to be in charge. Maybe because the North will follow him and they won't follow Dany. Did you have something, Ashaya?
I'm so sorry, everyone, for coming in so hot like that. I came in hard. At you hard. But no, every time I make that symbol, Aziz, it's just going to be that you're facing Sean way too much.
Okay.
And it sounds distracting to me.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And this takes us back also to Jon's time with Daenerys. It may not be about who's in charge or they need to rally behind a northern leader, but it could be that love is the death of duty. Remember that whole line? Jon going to the caves with Dany is like, uh-oh, you can't go fight the others with everything you've got if you're in love. I mean, that might be what Bran thinks. I'm going to disagree with Bran if that's his concept. Let me give a hat tip to at DM Trombone, Twitter handle Noise Police, because this was the person who turned me on to this concept. And it could really fit Bran's motive here. Keeping love out of it. And again, what I said during your comments there is that this is something Bran doesn't understand very well. He's never really had love in that sense, romantic love. And this also comes back to a very interesting thing, which is the beginning of season 7, episode 7, which was Bronn's kind of jokey, bro-y conversation with Jaime about how it all comes down to Cox. Now that scene is presented kind of crassly, but I think it's actually got really interesting subtext, which is that, and this is why I disagree with Bran, if this is Bran's take, that love is going to screw with Jon and Dany and their ability to fight the others. I think it's the opposite is true. Bronn is pointing out to Jaime in that scene with the Unsullied gathered outside that why he's like, you won't see me fighting in an army where they don't have, if I don't have a cock. And Jaime's like, well, why not? He's like, well, guys spend their money on women, and he's like, well, what about families? It was like, yeah, you can't have a family without a cock either. And that's a good point, because a lot of people will fight for their family a lot harder than they'll fight for themselves. And Jon is a great example. Jon doesn't care about his own life half as much as he cares about fighting for the North or the Wall or his family. So
I have a question for you.
Sure.
What body part would you fight the hardest for?
The neck. Protect the neck.
Valid.
So I think it's really interesting. That's a lot for you to respond to here. I maybe should have paused in the middle of some of this, but I think it's interesting this whole concept of what's worth fighting for. Why are we fighting? What are we trying to save? And if without love, what are I think it's wrong to take love out of the equation.
I mean, we see Cersei seems to have adjusted her take on things when she thinks that she's pregnant, right? Yeah. My thoughts are like, I don't want to distract from all that because it's all good. But I have another angle that is maybe a little less exciting, maybe even a little bit negative. But I'll say that I also have this dominant question in my mind of like, why does he even need to know? Yeah. Right? A question we've even kind of wondered in the past. What difference does it make? Right? But even more specifically, why now? Why does Bran want him to know right now? Why does Bran think this is the time?
The timing is so telling. Yeah.
So one of my thoughts is that Bran, similar to Jojen, Melisandre, maybe the Night King, he just has these visions of things to come. And he doesn't necessarily understand why. He just knows that it's supposed to happen. So he just does it. Does that make sense? So
he doesn't see Jon and Dany together later, and he thinks we may as well get this over with. Maybe.
Yeah. Whatever it is, he just could have some vision of something in the future. And for that thing to happen, Jon needs to know this, and so we need to tell him. And the thing is, that's a hard reason because they don't really show us that. Does that make sense? Something we kind of have to kind of guess at and make sense of, and they don't really show us. But to be fair, they don't really show us what Cersei's thinking, and we guess at that. It doesn't mean our guesses are wrong or that they aren't trying to show us. So, they have to know that there's teams. There's this horde, this culture of people picking apart every line, every shot, So I feel like they're careful about how they know what we're talking about. They have Arya defend Sansa. They have Cersei. They have them the what's his name? The Golden Company commander explain why the elephants aren't coming. They know what's out in the community, especially over a year for them to take account for all that in the script writing. But all that said, here's another thought: is that it might just be for the audience, right? Yeah. They might. Pretty much everyone watching this podcast, we're in this. Right, we're watching every episode 2 or 3 times. We're taking notes. We've read all the books. We
expect to be buried in the crypts.
Right, we're watching multiple podcasts.
What is that, Sean? You've read all the books?
Maybe not all the books, but we've done some reading of some books.
I've read them enough for both of us.
Yeah, but you got to remember, and there's a lot of us, right? I'm going to say there's hundreds of people watching this right now. Thousands of people are going to end up watching this podcast that we're doing. Millions of people watching Game of Thrones. And they don't all, it's silly as it seems to us, but they don't all get it. They don't all understand that Dany and Jon are aunt and nephew. Does that make sense?
They know that they're related, but they don't necessarily know. Yeah.
And so some of these things, maybe it's not connected to some long-term plot or some vision that Bran had. It might literally just be for the audience's sake. It's just time to make sure the audience knows is really what Bran is saying. Does that make sense? That's to me, that's like the most basic explanation that keeps me from, especially since all the other guesses are so vague and obtuse and uncertain and counterable. You know what I mean? I could just kind of chalk it up to the audience needs to know.
Okay, it could be that. Yeah, and one way or another, it's creating yet another Game of Thrones here. We have yet more controversy over who should rule and claims and all that. Even if Jon doesn't want to push it, it might not be all about him because if Sam keeps this attitude, if he stays fired up about no, Jon should be king, he's got a lot of things he can do. We know how he manipulated things at the wall when he wanted Jon to be Lord Commander. He told people certain things. He manipulated the different commanders and said things, and it was pretty clever. If he wants to do that again, the first person he should go talk to is Sansa and say, hey, Sansa, I know you weren't necessarily too enthused about Daenerys. Well, let me tell you, actually, Jon is the true king. So, and then he can tell Arya. And then it's the whole, the Starks are, Bran's obviously on board. So for different reasons, but if he has Sansa and Arya on board telling Jon, no, you need to do this. Now, I'm not sure that they would, but you could see why they would, right? You could see why they would back Jon up. And Sansa already is a little anti-Dany. I mean, not anti-Dany, but she would rather have Jon in charge. That seems clear. So it could, like, Sam could really push the envelope and start conspiring and talking to other lords and people who matter, and that could be a problem. So it's weird to see Sam in this role of potentially causing problems, but he was traumatized, and it makes sense to me. But I'm worried that it will make him that we're going to have to say some negative things about Sam later.
Just had another thought. Maybe they need to not get married. Maybe finding out that they're related will stop them from getting married. And maybe that's what needs to happen.
Well, I definitely said that, but I don't know why they need to not be married. Why?
Right.
What's the point of keeping them from being married?
But I'm realizing it might be a reason Bran's pushing for it quick, before they really fall in love and get married.
Before
they run off and elope like Rob.
It's too late. Okay.
Or whatever else. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why would that be? Maybe because...
That was my initial interpretation.
Okay.
That's why he thought he had to do it sooner rather than later.
We do sort of have a reason we've stated. We're not sure that it's the right one, but the reason, if I can restate it, it's that Bran doesn't necessarily understand the value of love in terms of fighting for it, and he might think that it's a distraction, like Aemon's, death of duty and all that stuff. So it could just be that simple.
So another thought that I had that I talked a little bit on our preview episode that I want to bring up again. I might bring this up every freaking episode because I think I think it's mad. I think people understand. A lot of our thoughts guiding how this concludes are Martin's statement, and even if Martin didn't make the statement, his obviously what he's doing, it's going to be bittersweet. This is not going to end with Jon and Dany get married, sit on the Iron Throne, have 3 kids, and live happily ever after. Cersei gets killed in this triumphant moment by Arya and marries whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, or does Arya wouldn't get married as part of a happy ending, I suppose. But you see what I'm saying? It's going to be bittersweet. And a lot of my thoughts, and probably most people's thoughts on this, have usually centered around like who's going to live and who's going to die. But it's occurred to me recently, it doesn't have to be about life and death to be bittersweet. For example, and this is a thought I had specifically that I'm revisiting now with this idea of Bran trying to stop Jon and Dany from getting married. What if the way this ends is, for example, just throwing this out, but like Jon and Dany both live, but they just can't be together. Dany sits on the Iron Throne, rules Winterfell. Sansa is queen in the north. Jon goes back to be Lord Commander of the Wall. What if the Night King isn't defeated? He's just run back beyond the wall, and they have to rebuild the wall and man the Night's Watch. And Jon has to take that on and can't do it with a wife and a kid. He's got to go be Lord Commander when this is all said and done.
That wouldn't stop. Yeah, but he could just divorce. Like there's this divorce. That doesn't stop that from happening.
I suppose he could, but it might be easier to not let it happen in the first place. If love is the death of duty,
well, I agree.
Jon might have a harder time going to the wall.
Yeah, I agree, but that doesn't. I don't know. That seems like it falls short. I can see that being true, but it seems like it falls short as a reason for Bran to blow all this up. You know what I mean? Like it.
Yeah.
How I don't know that. Like I can see he has some thought that their relationship could interfere with the ultimate goal, but it wouldn't interfere with the ultimate goal afterwards. Like if they're still married afterwards, who cares? Like that's not gonna. I don't think that matters. That's not gonna. That has nothing to do with defeating the Night King. But I can see why you would say that. I just don't know if it's enough to be the full reason. There might be multiple reasons, and that could be part of it.
Again, do you think that like the final scene is going to be Arya plunging a dagger through the Night King's heart and the show's over?
Certainly not. No.
I think we're going to get fallout about who's left in charge.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean Bran cares about it. We're talking about, yes, it matters, but that doesn't mean Bran is worried about it. He might be thinking, all that I care about is making sure we take care of the Night King. Everything after that is gravy.
Possibly, but he might care about it, especially if we on some level maybe expect him to live 1,000 years.
Oh yeah,
this role of Blood Raven. He might really care about what
he might really care, but I don't see how whether or not Jon or Dany are married is going to make such a big difference.
And also, how are they going to communicate that to us? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
They better get to work on showing us Bran.
It has some
next episode.
There's some merit to that theory, but it also has some problems. I guess you could say. Okay, a couple more super chats, and then some final thoughts, and then we'll call it a day. From Padfoot Studios, do you think there is a faction of White Walkers that stayed behind in the Land of Always Winter? Do you think the baby they turned will pay off this season? That's a really tough one because the Walkers are portrayed, the way they look is so ancient. So it's kind of hard to imagine that this baby would be one of them yet. But I definitely think they have to explain how some of this works. They have to explain how some of this origin works, how some of the White Walkers, like, they function and how this all... We need explanations.
Do they breastfeed the baby? Who breastfeeds the baby? Is it just his diaper change?
You gotta have those ice nipples. Yeah.
I'm sure I showed you, Sean, as the seasons have gone on, the different memes and artwork and scenarios that people have drawn up of the White Walkers raising this child. Yeah. It's one of my favorite little things.
It's my favorite. Maybe one of my favorite types of humor is, grand, villainous monstrous characters, Thanos or White Walkers or whatever, doing day-to-day stuff. The Emperor
You
has
love that
to,
Darth Vader.
adjust his seat or whatever. Chad Vader, yeah.
Chad Vader, yeah. That's fun. So yeah, that's a good question though. I wonder. This is one of the things I love about doing live streams is that you guys come up with these situations from earlier seasons that may or may not be relevant, that often are relevant to some of these current plot lines that we couldn't possibly have come up with in our own on 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later. So this is really, we didn't always used to do these as live streams. And, I think a few people wish we did it as just more normal and not live stream. But this is, I want to say, this is one of the real values of live streaming is the input of this very knowledgeable fandom that comes to watch our episodes.
I have speculated, by the way, as far as the White Walkers go, that they may split their forces up. Right?
Yeah, I like that idea.
They don't necessarily need to send all the White Walkers and all 100,000 Whites to Winterfell right now.
Yeah.
Right? They could send 3 White Walkers and 30,000 Whites to Winterfell and 3 White Walkers and 30,000 Whites down to King's Landing. And
yeah, they've showed the ability to understand some strategy, like the whole spreading fear thing was clearly a sign of intelligence.
The visions that both Dany and Bran had of a dragon flying over King's Landing, we've always assumed was Dany on a dragon. And one of the post-episode little bits, D&D said something to the effect of, we don't know if that's in the past or the future. So maybe it's some past dragon, right? Hundreds of years ago flying over King's Landing. But also, maybe it's a freaking ice dragon, and the Night King just flies to King's Landing.
That seems like way more likely, because who would care about a dragon's shadow passing over King's Landing hundreds of years ago?
That the landscape of King's Landing would have changed over these hundreds of years.
Ooh, good point. Yeah, hundreds of years. Yeah.
So you can only say it's within a certain time period.
It's only a 300-year-old city. Yeah, it's
only a 300-year-old city, and a lot of it was not the same. And anyways, whether that's all nitpicky. But it seems very unlikely to me that that dragon is in the past.
Yeah, it would seem to be kind of irrelevant, Yeah.
I'm gonna branch off a little bit here because because it is a lot of this is thinking about where things are going and how it's going to happen, and another thought that I had, a prominent thought, going through a rewatch of everything that I brought up in our preview episode is. A lot of times I and other people think about what's the Night King's goal? What's the Night King doing? And part of me is okay with he just represents evil and death and darkness, and he's just coming to kill everyone, and we got to stop him. And connected to that, maybe the Lord of Light represents life and light, and they're just trying to stop. And it seems like visions and fires and other types of magic and the White Walkers are all kind of coming about at the same time. Melisandre's looking for the prince that was promised at the same moment that the White Walkers are coming. How quickly she just abandoned this War of the Five Kings when Davos showed him that note from the north. For the war, this War of Five Kings is meaningless. Let's go. Don't execute Davos. Move forward to the north. Forget everything else.
Forget turning on a dime. She turned on a penny.
Yeah. So point of all that being is that I'm leading into this other statement that was made by Jojen, by the way. I started paying real close attention to Melisandre, Jojen, and Bran because they say prophetic things. They have these visions of the future.
True.
And Jojen told Sam, in that moment when Sam and Gilly bump into Bran and crew and they're trying to go different directions across the wall, Bran's trying to explain why he can't come south with Sam. And Jojen says, Sam, you've seen the army of the dead. Sam's like, how'd you know that? And he says, the Night's Watch can't stop them. The kings and armies of Westeros can't stop them. So, conveniently enough, we have this Queen Dany with armies that are not of Westeros coming to stop them. But it's worth noting, Cersei is also a queen with the Golden Company that's not of Westeros. And I this might be a little far-fetched, but I do think it's possible, especially if we think this battle at Winterfell is coming in the 3rd episode. What the hell's happening for the next 3 episodes? They might lose this battle, retreat south, send the women and children to Pike, and have this last stand at King's Landing where Cersei, with the Golden Company and a bunch of scorpions, leads the standoff against the White Walkers.
I just want to say Lyanna Mormont would be so disappointed in you right now for sending the women
sending
and
the women and
children.
children.
Yeah, maybe the children haven't been trained up yet, but they've been training. God.
Well, I agree.
really
I
young
want to
children.
see them in the battle scene. The preview, they didn't show us any women and children on the lines prepping for battle. I'll be disappointed.
Presumably they'd
along
be
with
archers,
Lyanna.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I hope they were just not in the trailer, but I hope they're there too. Yeah.
One way or the other, though, I can see that. I feel like I was building up to some point with all that, and I forgot what it was now. But just the idea that the White Walkers might split their forces.
Yeah.
That everyone isn't necessarily going to King's Landing. And it would also be this bittersweet moment. That's what I was kind of trying to say. This sort of bittersweet moment. If everyone had to give credit to Cersei for saving the day, right? This villain that we're all expecting to die, that everyone wants to kill. That if she actually makes these good, clever, strategic, forethought planning that enables them to beat the White Walkers, then she should get a wildfire ready to go at King's Landing.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. Well,
Let me throw another theory your way that came from who came from it? Was it I can't remember. I was on LML's stream and this idea came up from one of his guests and I can't remember what it was, so I apologize for not properly accrediting the idea. But the idea was that Cersei could die and Qyburn could bring her back because Qyburn's kind of screwed without her. Because he doesn't have anywhere else to go. And so she becomes kind of the way it's presented is it's a way for her to level up, be a little more powerful in the face of these other things. And it also touches on a few book possibilities that are floating out there in terms of myth, like a new Night Queen, which she would be, could be in a sense. So it seems it's another kind of somewhat far-fetched idea, but really good far-fetched idea that you could definitely see happening.
If Qyburn sinks a obsidian dagger in her heart, her eyes turn blue.
Yeah, just whatever he did to Gregor does to her, but Gregor can't speak as far as we know, so I'm not sure that would work.
That king can't speak either, but he's doing all right.
So that's kind of that's one problem with the idea is the undead don't seem to speak, except for Jon and Beric, so it's not completely off the table. But it's a very cool idea. Super chat also from Dornish Dan and from Nadim Atala. Hey, Aziz, Sean, and Ashea. First time I'm here live, so cool. I have an idea for History of Westeros listeners' names. Histerossi, from a proud Westorian. That is a pretty good one. Histerossi. Yeah, we could try to throw that one in sometimes. I like it. We'll see if it sticks. So, Sean, final thoughts. Did you have any comments on Cersei as Corpse Queen or any other ideas? Any other things we didn't touch on? Otherwise, we'll call it a night and see y'all again in a couple days.
I feel like I got it all out of my system. I guarantee you I'll think of something 3 minutes after we sign off.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so let's do this. We were asked this at the beginning by Rebea. I think it was Rebea. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's hear your good, bad, and the ugly. Your favorite scene, your least favorite scene, and your ugly scene, which you can define that how you want.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think of them in good, bad. I guess it'd be like ugly, I guess, for Bronn to betray Tyrion and Jaime. Good was Sansa kind of realizing the logistics necessary. Whoever the queen is, whatever the bent knee, whatever we have to feed people. And the ugly, I guess. I think my favorite scene was Drogon staring Jon down there. I thought, but not only was it like kind of humorous, but I'm gonna give him credit for like the emotion conveyed in the dragon.
The dragon had a real facial,
that CGI or whatever that was. That was really good.
Yeah, that was good. I like it, and I think it was Sanrixian who pointed out that her being an artist, she's aware of these things. That they did a better job with the dragon's color this year. Rhaegal looks green. Whereas before it was kind of like, is that green? You couldn't tell. Like people argued over which dragon buzzed Jon when he was walking towards Dragonstone. And it was Drogon, but people wanted it to be Rhaegal. I think it was Drogon though, but it was partly because the color wasn't clear.
Was it distinct enough for it to be clear? The fact that people were debating means that, yeah.
Yeah, so it should have been more clear. I mean, I don't even know if it was Rhaegal or Drogon. That just kind of proves my point.
Do you do the worries of the week for this stream, or is that just for Wednesday?
We'll do that. We've already kind of done the worries. We did the worries in the preview episode.
Okay.
And we might do some. We'll do some on Wednesday because because Lady Gwyn hasn't gotten to weigh in on those, but we did our worries for the preview episode, I think, and
All right.
and hardly anyone really died this
Yeah,
episode.
that's true.
Wasn't
That is
much
true.
wasn't much death this episode.
All right.
Okay, so
I could make a season prediction, by the way.
okay, go for it. Then I'll do my good, bad, and ugly.
Another thing I can see happening, by the way, is Dany flying her dragon gets in a fight with the Night King flying his dragon. And in fact, I almost expect this. It's like the Star Wars pattern where you have like a massive army battle happening, a one-on-one sword fight happening, and an aerial spaceship battle happening. We could easily have that. We could have these armies of whites and Unsullied fighting at the same time that Jon or Arya or someone is one-on battling some White Walker at the same time that the dragons are in the air fighting it out, right? I think we'll have this 3-section battle concurring all at once. And in that, I can see Dany's dragon getting hurt, like the dragons like taking each other out. Or maybe Jon is flying in battle. Because that's another thing, you kind of have to expect Jon's going to be on the ground with his sword fighting, not flying around in the air. But also you got to kind of expect Jon's going to be flying around in the air. They just showed he's got a dragon. How's he not going to be on his dragon? So how do we get this both? And my thought is that Jon and or Dany's dragon gets injured, falls to the ground, even if the dragon is not killed, maybe it's fatally wounded, but it's going to fall to the ground in the middle of a bunch of whites. And it's breathing fire to keep them at bay to protect Jon and or Dany, whoever it is, right? Then the other will swoop down to try to save them, to scoop them up. And then the dragon on the ground, in order to not be turned into another ice dragon, they have to burn it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It's all kind of sad and tragic, but I can see that sad, tragic thing happening. Dany having to burn one of her dragons to keep it from being taken over.
At least
by
to
the
stop
Night
it.
King.
Yeah. Obviously, all those different details could come out a lot of different ways.
And
But the bottom line is preventing another undead dragon.
And it's a way to get Jon both flying on a dragon, but then back down on the ground with his sword.
Yeah,
so.
I do think Jon's dragon died. I mean, I think both dragons, all 3 dragons, probably die. But
Jesus, he's
yeah, I know, really harsh, huh? So, Shaya, do you have a good, bad, and ugly?
I should have that on Wednesday, right?
Cool. Yeah, you do.
That-
Okay, I'm just
wouldn't
seeing
that
if
be
you were ready
better?
now. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, give you more time to think about it.
I mean, I think my favorite scene was Sam, his reaction probably, and my least favorite scene was dragon riding.
Okay.
And for ugly, I don't love Gendry's haircut. It's not so good looking. There you go. I'll have another answer
You're
on
not
Wednesday.
smoldering like Arya.
I read an interview, by the way. They did that because too many people in the audience were confusing him and Podrick.
Oh, really?
They wanted to distinguish him from Podrick.
Podrick's hair was a little extra shaggy too.
I guess that's why they had him grow it out a little.
Hair, cut Gendry.
Yeah. Okay, so my I'll say my my bad was the rescue scene, which was just I already explained why I wasn't so enthused with that, but at least I also gave it some silver linings. And I'll say the ugly was the dragon riding scene, even though it was fun. I don't think it was a bad scene. I don't think it was that good of a scene either because of the complaints that you guys both put out pretty well there, said well, which was it was just too quick, and the saddle thing is just like, wow. It just continues to baffle, but whatever, it's been established.
I will say it was not only the saddle, but also the riding an animal flying around CGI. It's just not there yet.
Yeah.
It just never really it's not going to age well. It doesn't look great now, and I don't think it'll look great in 5 years.
Okay.
So I'm
that's
extra
possible.
judgmental of that, and it brings back other memories of bad CGI. In addition to the idiocy of the saddle. So anyway, just to interject, I have more criticisms of that scene. It's the real bad.
So I'll say the good was the legitimate surprise of how they executed Sam telling Jon, like the build up to that. What the trigger for that, meaning Sam's being upset about his family being killed. I definitely did not see that coming, even though we talked about that would be something that had to be dealt with, was that Sam's family was killed by Dany, and that's going to have to be dealt with. Did not foresee it being the trigger for Jon finding out about his parentage. I think it's really interesting. I think it's definitely not what a lot of people expect. A lot of people were surprised by that. Some people were a little put off by it, but I am happy with that because it was a surprise. And it's a really overanalyzed part of the thing. We've all been for decades discussing how Jon's going to find out. Definitely didn't see this coming. We'll talk about it more on Wednesday as a possibility for how it might go down in the book. And then the fact that during this episode, I realized how much it might end up paralleling I was going to say John Bradley, but that's Jon Snow when I say Jon. So Sam's the way he manipulated the Lord Commander situation and how that could be a preview of how he handles this two different claimants to the throne situation. It just fits so well, and I'm really happy that to be surprised by that and that I didn't see it coming.
By the way, one other thing, like an overall thing, we mentioned overall and a few times individually, but the parallels between this and season 1 episode.
So many, yeah. It was great.
It's worth going back and watching that. And I think I had literally, I have this hot tweet with like 300 likes, by the way. If you do follow me on Twitter, check it out. Because I tried to list all of them there.
I'm going to mute you every time you talk about your Twitter, Sean.
But I think I literally had like a dozen, I don't know, parallels.
There's a lot
between them. Some
we
are
love
big
parallels.
Or structural, some are like minor, but there's a bunch in there.
So yeah, it's actually true. What we did here at the house was we watched the episode and then we immediately watched season 1, episode 1. It was nice because we have one of our roommates here has not seen Game of Thrones. It was our way of getting him. He was like picking up. The whole house is excited. And there's this one guy who was like, "Man, I need to get in on this." So it was fun to rewatch. We killed 2 birds with one stone there. We got to find more of those parallels, which is partly what turned me on to realizing some of those musical connections. Because that's a lot harder to catch, I think, and having heard music, a certain song play in years. But also just, it's just really fun to look back on all those things. So, yeah, Game of Thrones is doing it again. We're having a blast, and this is just the beginning of the final season. So we shall be back soon. We'll see some of you all on Wednesday, more of you on Saturday, and more of you again next Monday for the review of episode 2. Thanks to Ashea. Thanks to Sean. Thanks to our live single-person audience, Jinx Lear. And we will see you all next time. Oh, we got to do, I forgot about the change of the patronage here. So let me do that. Let's do our quick patron shout-outs here. Thanks also to Michael Klarfeld for the video intro and to Jesse Kowal and Joey Townsend for our music.
Michael Klarfeld, who has a short film coming out soon, right?
Oh, yeah. That's worth mentioning.
Oops, I didn't unmute myself. But yes, Michael Klarfeld has a short film, Alone is what it's called in English. It's 7 to 8 minutes short film, and it'll be posted, I believe, on the 19th. But yeah, you'll see that link, and it was a very nice little watch. Right
on. So, as I said at the beginning, the majority of patron shoutouts will be on the book to show episodes. But a few of them will be in this episode. In particular, the Beard Guard level. Sean, you want to go ahead and read this?
We've got the Hand of the Beard, Lady Suzanne Sinistral, Lord Commander, George the Golden, Sir Joshua Oakhart, the White Oak. Special shout out, as always, to Lady Rita of the Copper Mane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor. Oh, who, by the way, yeah, check it out. She sent us like 7 cases of 7 boxes of these Game of Thrones Oreos.
We looked all over town for them, couldn't find them.
I looked at so many different stores and I told so many different people, and Rita sent us this massive box, and it's lovely.
And it arrived right on time. We had them there, and our friend Joe, who was a National Forest tourist, made he and his family made cupcakes.
Do not say that Joe did it. Joe's wife Mandy bought the Oreos and found them and made the Oreos.
Oh, he didn't even buy the Oreos? Okay, so he just brought them over.
He brought them over, and he was very clear with me that to not give him credit where it was not due, and I want to make sure. Mandy is awesome and made these lovely. It was a great idea. She made cupcakes using the Oreos because they have different sigils on them, and she used the Oreos as little cupcake toppers, and they were delicious, and I ate one while we were streaming, so there we go. Thank you,
well,
Mandy.
I guess I didn't get that message. Okay, good thing that
just
you did.
Like a man, and give Joe credit for making that.
I said he and his family. Okay, cool. So, and where were we at? You were at this one here.
Sir Joff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multi-faced beard of Platinum, red and brown, stay frosty. Sir Tim Corgyle, Mad Boy of the Western Desert. Queen Helena von Landstein, partying like it's 1999 since 1980-something. A kingdom for a drink.
Hell yeah. All right. So thanks again, everybody. We will see you next time. And Valar Rereadus.